It's funny how fast a few minutes can turn into a lifetime of regret. I'm 34 now, a project manager for a software company in Austin, living a life that's about as far removed from dusty hiking boots and remote wilderness as you can get. But there was a time, not so long ago, when all I craved was solitude and the bite of a cold, crisp morning air. I was 27 then, a different person, full of a misplaced confidence that only youth and a lack of real consequences can give you. Back then, my passion was photography, especially landscape photography. I'd spend entire weekends, sometimes even an extra day or two if I could finagle the time off deep in the national forests, chasing that perfect shot of mist over a valley or the stark silhouette of a pine against a rising sun. I wasn't just some weekend warrior. I'd taken wilderness survival courses, knew how to read a compass and a topo map better than most people know their phone's home screen. I could build a shelter, purify water, and handle a minor injury. I thought I was prepared for anything the wild could throw at me. That was my biggest mistake. This particular trip was to the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in Washington state. It's a vast, ancient place, full of towering Douglas firs and hemlocks, rugged peaks, and a quiet that can swallow you whole. I'd researched a specific area, rumored to have an old, abandoned logging trail leading to a pristine, forgotten lake. My plan was simple. Hike in early Friday morning, find a good spot to camp near the lake, spend Saturday shooting, and hike out Sunday afternoon. Pretty standard stuff for me. I packed light but smart, my camera gear, a two-man tent, a compact sleeping bag, a small stove, dehydrated meals, a first aid kit, and enough water to last me a day before I'd need to filter more. Crucially, I was alone, always alone. I preferred it that way for photography, fewer distractions, more focus. Plus, there was a certain pride in knowing I could rely solely on myself. The drive out was long, ending with about 10 miles on a gravel Forest Service road, barely wide enough for one vehicle. It was already past noon by the time I parked my beat-up Subaru Forester at the unofficial trailhead, just a widened section of the road where a faint, overgrown path disappeared into the trees. The sky was an indifferent gray, the kind that promised nothing but threatened nothing either. Just there. I geared up, locking my car, double-checking my pack. Before heading into the dense woods, I took a moment to look around. Nothing but trees, stretching up to the sky, their tips swaying almost imperceptibly in a breeze I couldn't feel down on the forest floor. The only sounds were the distant caw of a crow and the rustle of dry leaves under my boots as I took my first steps onto the trail. The path was indeed faint, winding through thick underbrush, occasionally marked by a faded ribbon tied to a tree branch. It was slower going than I'd anticipated. The forest floor was a soft, spongy carpet of moss and fallen needles, silencing my footsteps almost entirely. It was beautiful, though, ancient, untamed. Shafts of pale sunlight occasionally pierced the canopy, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. I kept my camera ready, but the light wasn't quite right yet for the shots I envisioned. After about 2 hours of hiking, just as I was starting to feel the familiar ache in my shoulders, I paused to consult my map. I was making good time despite the challenging terrain. That's when I noticed it. Not a sound, not a sight, but a feeling. A subtle shift in the air, a peculiar stillness that wasn't quite natural. The breeze that had rustled the canopy higher up had completely vanished down here, and with it, the usual symphony of the forest. The distant crow had stopped. The rustle of leaves was gone. Even my own breathing, which I'd grown accustomed to hearing as a low rasp, seemed to dampen. It wasn't an absolute silence, not yet. More like the volume had been deliberately turned down ever so slightly, enough to make the hairs on my arms prickle. Enough to make me stand perfectly still, straining my ears, wondering what I was missing. I stood there, a statue carved from anxiety, my backpack suddenly feeling impossibly heavy, the air thick and unmoving around me. My heart, which had been beating a steady rhythm of exertion, now hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the unnatural quiet. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a predator had passed through, scaring off the smaller creatures, but even predators make noise. This was different. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to move, to run, but my feet were rooted. I focused on my breathing, trying to slow it down, to listen harder. The only sound was the frantic thump-thump of my own pulse in my ears. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two, a faint rustle broke the spell. It was just a small branch somewhere far off, disturbed by a squirrel perhaps, or a gust of wind I still couldn't feel. The sound was so insignificant, yet it felt like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. My shoulders relaxed marginally, the tension easing just enough for me to take a cautious step forward. "Hello," I called out, the word feeling ridiculously loud, swallowed almost instantly by the dense trees. My voice sounded weak, an imposter in this ancient space. No reply, just the renewed silence, a little less absolute now, but still profoundly unnerving. I decided to press on. My logical mind told me I was being overly dramatic. It was a wilderness, not a horror movie set. Forests had quiet moments. Maybe a large animal had just moved through the area. Bears, cougars, they were here after all. But I'd encountered them before, or signs of them, and it had never felt quite like this. This was a stillness that vibrated with unseen energy, a sense of being watched rather than just being alone. I picked up my pace, a nervous energy propelling me forward. The path remained faint, but I was confident in my navigation. The map showed the trail running roughly east for another hour or so before a gentle descent to the lake. The sun, which had been an indifferent gray earlier, was now beginning its slow descent, filtering through the canopy in longer, weaker rays. I needed to find a campsite before dusk. As I walked, the peculiar stillness persisted. No bird song, no insect hum, no rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Just the soft crunch of my boots on the mossy forest floor and the amplified sound of my own breath. I kept glancing over my shoulder, a primal instinct kicking in. There was never anything there, just endless trees, their shadows lengthening into distorted shapes that seemed to twist and writhe in my peripheral vision. My mind, usually a fortress of logic and planning, began to conjure images, things moving just out of sight, eyes watching from the deep shadows between the colossal trunks. I shook my head, trying to clear the irrational thoughts. It was the solitude, I told myself, playing tricks on me. Another hour passed and the descent began. The terrain grew steeper, the path more challenging. I gripped my hiking poles tighter, focusing on my footing, trying to distract myself from the growing unease. The air grew cooler as I dropped lower, carrying with it the faint, clean scent of water. The lake was close. Relief washed over me, a powerful tide that pushed back against the encroaching anxiety. Once I was there, once I could set up camp, build a fire, the eerie silence would surely dissipate. A campfire was comfort, a beacon against the wild. The trees thinned slightly, and through a narrow gap I caught my first glimpse of the lake. It was exactly as I'd imagined, a shimmering disk of silver gray reflecting the bruised twilight sky. Towering pines stood sentinel around its edges, their dark forms mirrored perfectly in the glass-smooth surface. It was breathtakingly beautiful, a truly wild, untouched place, a photographer's dream. But as I stepped out from the last line of trees and onto the small, flat clearing that served as a makeshift shore, the beauty was overshadowed by something else. The silence. Here by the water, it was even more profound. The lake was utterly still, not a ripple disturbing its surface, not a breath of wind stirring the leaves. It was as if the entire world had paused, holding its breath just for me. There was a single, ancient log lying near the water's edge, perfectly positioned to offer a spectacular view. I dropped my pack next to it with a thud that seemed to echo for miles in the quiet. The sun was dipping below the western ridge now, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples that slowly bled into bruised blues and grays. Dusk was settling fast. My usual routine involved immediately setting up my tent, then gathering firewood. But tonight I hesitated. The atmosphere was too heavy, too strange. My camera, which usually felt like an extension of my arm, remained untouched in its padded case. The desire to capture this incredible scene was there, but a stronger, more urgent instinct had taken over, an overwhelming need to understand the silence. I walked to the water's edge, crouching down, reaching out a hand. The water was icy cold, perfectly clear. I splashed a few drops on my face, the chill a welcome jolt. Nothing. No insects buzzing, no frogs croaking, no fish jumping. Not even the gentle lapping sound that water makes against a shore. It was unsettling in a way I couldn't articulate. I'd been to countless remote lakes, and they were always alive with the sounds of their inhabitants. This lake was dead silent, eerily so. My eyes scanned the opposite shore, then the surrounding forest. Nothing, just trees and water. No signs of other human presence, no discarded gear, no old fire rings, no footprints other than my own. This place truly was forgotten. But why the silence? A shiver ran down my spine, unrelated to the cold. I stood up, hugging myself, trying to rub away the goosebumps. I needed to focus. I needed to set up camp, build a fire. Logic dictated that a roaring fire would banish the shadows and the creeping dread. I unzipped my pack, pulled out my tent, and began the familiar process of assembly. Each snap of a pole, each rustle of nylon felt deafeningly loud. I was acutely aware of the vast emptiness around me, the way my movements seemed to disturb the perfect, unnerving stillness. It was like I was performing on a stage, and the entire forest was my audience, unseen, unheard, but undeniably present. As I secured the last tent stake, the last vestiges of daylight were fading. The sky was now a deep, inky blue, studded with the first pinpricks of stars. The temperature had dropped significantly. I needed that fire. I grabbed my small hatchet and began scouting for firewood. There was plenty of fallen timber, ancient branches and deadfall scattered across the forest floor. I worked quickly, gathering armfuls of dry twigs and larger logs. My hands were numb with cold, but the physical activity was a welcome distraction. The repetitive motion, the familiar task, helped to ground me. Back at my makeshift camp, I knelt by the fire pit I'd cleared near the log. I built a careful teepee of kindling, adding progressively larger pieces of wood. I pulled out my lighter, flicked it. The small flame bloomed, casting a flickering, golden glow on the surrounding trees. I carefully touched it to the kindling. A whisper of smoke, then a crackle, and the first tentative flames began to dance. The sight of the fire, the smell of burning wood, was a profound comfort. It pushed back the encroaching darkness, creating a small, safe circle in the vast wilderness. For a moment, I almost forgot the silence. Almost. I sat on the log, extending my hands towards the warmth, watching the flames grow. The heat was a physical relief against the cold. I pulled out my small stove and a dehydrated meal, deciding that a hot dinner was exactly what I needed. As the water boiled, I allowed myself to relax a fraction, to take in the quiet beauty of the scene. The stars were out now, millions of them, a breathtaking display of cosmic dust against the velvet black. The lake, reflecting the starlight, shimmered like scattered diamonds. It was then that I noticed it. Not a sound, not a sight, but a feeling growing steadily, undeniably. The feeling of being watched intensified. It was no longer a vague apprehension, but a sharp, undeniable sensation, like a cold hand pressing against the back of my neck. My head snapped up, my eyes darting into the impenetrable darkness beyond the fire's reach. There was nothing, just the swirling shadows, the outlines of ancient trees, the silent lake, but the feeling was powerful, visceral. Something was out there, and it wasn't a bear or a cougar. It felt intelligent. I reached for my headlamp, clicking it on. The powerful beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the trees, illuminating trunks, branches, moss-covered rocks. Nothing. I swept it again, slower this time, searching for any anomaly, any flicker of movement, any pair of reflecting eyes. Still nothing. My heart began to pound again, faster this time, a frantic staccato against the silence. My hands were shaking. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't the solitude playing tricks. This was real. "Hello," I called out again, my voice trembling despite my efforts to keep it steady. The word hung in the air, then was swallowed, leaving behind an even more profound quiet. I stood up, turning slowly, scanning the perimeter of my camp. The fire crackled, its warmth a welcome contrast to the icy dread seeping into my bones. My eyes strained, trying to pierce the darkness. I thought I saw something. A deeper shadow momentarily between two massive firs almost 100 yards away. It wasn't moving, just there. Then it was gone, absorbed back into the general blackness. My mind raced. What could it be? Another hiker? Unlikely. This trail was abandoned. A hunter? Even more unlikely, given the time of year and the remoteness. A lost person? But why wouldn't they respond? Why the silence? I fumbled in my pack, pulling out my small, heavy-duty multi-tool. It wasn't much of a weapon, but the solid weight of it in my hand was marginally reassuring. I considered my options. Pack up and leave, in the dark, through unknown terrain with something out there watching me. That seemed even more dangerous than staying put. I had a tent, a fire, and a limited sense of security within my small, illuminated circle. I forced myself to sit back down by the fire, but my gaze remained fixed on the darkness. I ate my rehydrated meal quickly, barely tasting it, every muscle in my body tensed, ready to spring. The warmth of the food was a small comfort, but it did nothing to dispel the chilling sensation of being observed. The night wore on, an agonizing crawl. I kept adding wood to the fire, needing its light and warmth as much for psychological comfort as for physical. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, no matter how small or distant, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I kept sweeping my headlamp around, convinced I would eventually catch whatever it was in its beam, but I never did. It was almost midnight when I saw it again. This time it was closer, much closer, maybe 50 yards to my left where the trees were particularly dense. A distinct shift in the shadows, not a reflection, not a trick of the light. A solid, dark shape taller than a man and impossibly still. It wasn't moving. It was just there, watching. My breath hitched in my throat, my blood ran cold. This wasn't an animal. It was too tall, too silent, too deliberate. Fear, raw and primal, clawed its way up my throat. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stared, transfixed at the silent, dark form. It stayed there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute. Then, just as silently as it had appeared, it was gone, absorbed back into the oppressive blackness of the forest. I was left staring at empty space, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing my multi-tool, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I backed up against the nearest tree, pressing myself against its rough bark, my eyes wide, darting from shadow to shadow. My mind was screaming, but no sound escaped my lips. What was that? What was that? Sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night huddled by the fire, periodically sweeping my headlamp into the darkness, straining my ears for any sound other than the crackle of the flames. The cold was secondary to the terror. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking menace. Every rustle of a distant branch was magnified into a monstrous approach. I imagined eyes watching me unseen, unblinking from the depths of the ancient forest. As the first faint streaks of dawn appeared in the eastern sky, a new sound finally reached my ears. A distant bird call, tentative at first, then joined by another and another. The forest was slowly, painstakingly beginning to wake up. The oppressive silence of the night was lifting. It was a gradual return, but undeniably present. The normal sounds of the wilderness, which I had taken for granted before, now felt like a symphony, a chorus of reassurance against the chilling quiet of the previous day and night. But the relief was short-lived. The sun rose, painting the lake in hues of gold and rose, dispelling the shadows that had tormented me. I could see clearly now. The spot where I'd seen the dark shape was just a cluster of trees, nothing out of the ordinary. No tracks, no broken branches, no signs of anything having been there. My rational mind tried to reassert itself. It was the lack of sleep, the fear, the isolation. My imagination, hyped up by the eerie silence, had played tricks on me. But the memory of that shape, tall and impossibly still, burned brightly in my mind. It had been too real to be a mere figment of my weary brain. I was exhausted, mentally and physically drained. My initial plan to spend Saturday shooting photos felt like a bad joke. All I wanted was to pack up and get out of there. But even that thought brought a fresh wave of dread. Hiking out alone, retracing my steps, feeling those unseen eyes on my back. The sun was up, but the sense of being watched still lingered, a faint echo of the night's terror. I decided to make breakfast. A hot meal might calm my nerves, help me think clearly. I boiled water, brewed coffee, and ate another dehydrated meal. The mundane tasks helped a little. But my gaze kept drifting to the tree line, my senses on high alert. By the time I finished, the sun was fully up, filtering through the trees, painting dappled patterns on the forest floor. The forest hummed with its usual sounds now, birds chirping, squirrels chattering, the gentle rustle of leaves in a returning breeze. It was almost like the previous night had been a bad dream, a figment of an overactive imagination. Almost. But I knew it hadn't been. The memory of that stillness, that presence, was too vivid, too visceral. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened, something had been watching me. I made a new plan. I would pack up my gear, but instead of hiking out immediately, I would spend the morning exploring the area around the lake. Not for photos, but for answers. I needed to know if there was any sign, any evidence of what I had seen. Maybe I would find tracks or a broken branch, something that could explain the presence, something that would allow my rational mind to retake control. The idea of leaving without understanding gnawed at me. My confidence, usually so robust in the wilderness, had been utterly shattered. I needed to rebuild it, even a little. I meticulously packed my tent and sleeping bag, stowing them in my backpack. I cleaned up my camp, ensuring no trace of my presence remained. The act of tidying helped to focus my mind. Once everything was packed, I grabbed my camera not to take pictures, but to have a record, just in case I found something. I also took my hiking poles, more for balance and a sense of preparedness than for actual defense. I started walking along the lake's edge, moving slowly, carefully, my eyes sweeping the ground for any sign. The earth here was soft, a mix of moss and damp soil, perfect for holding impressions. I walked for a good hour, following the curve of the lake, checking under bushes, peering into clumps of ferns. Nothing, not a single track, not a flattened patch of grass. It was as if whatever had been there had simply dissolved into thin air. The lack of evidence was almost more unsettling than finding something. It meant whatever I saw hadn't left a trace. It was too careful or too non-physical. I shook my head, trying to push away the supernatural thoughts that were trying to creep into my mind. There had to be a rational explanation. I continued my slow search, moving deeper into the woods surrounding the lake, expanding my perimeter. I checked the bases of ancient trees, looking for any scratches or marks. Nothing. The forest was pristine, untouched. As I moved further from the lake, the forest grew denser, the canopy thicker. The light grew dimmer and the air grew colder. I found myself walking through stands of trees that felt ancient, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The silence, which had seemed to lift with the sunrise, began to creep back in, subtly at first, then more pronounced. The birdsong grew fainter, the rustle of leaves less frequent. The oppressive quiet that had characterized yesterday afternoon, and especially the night, was returning. My stomach churned with a renewed sense of dread. No, not again. I needed to get out. My quest for answers was quickly being overwhelmed by the primal urge to flee, but I was already deeper in than I had intended. I paused, consulting my compass and map. I was heading northwest, away from my original trail. This wasn't smart. I needed to turn around, make my way back to the main path, and then hightail it out of here. But something held me back. A glint of something unusual, deep in the shadows between two massive Douglas firs, caught my eye. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a tiny speck of light against the overwhelming green and brown of the forest. Curiosity, a powerful and often dangerous force, overcame my fear. I took a cautious step towards it, then another. As I drew closer, the speck resolved itself into a small, reflective object. It was metallic, half buried in the moss and pine needles. I knelt down, brushing away the debris. It was a dog tag. Old, tarnished, but unmistakably a military dog tag. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The metal was cold, heavy in my palm. I wiped away the dirt, revealing the etched information. A name, a serial number, a blood type. It was from the Vietnam era, judging by the style and the dates. But what was it doing here, deep in the Gifford Pinchot, miles from any known settlement or military base? This wasn't just a dropped item, it was buried almost deliberately in a place no one would ever stumble upon. This was a mystery, a tangible piece of evidence of human presence, but a presence that predated any modern hiker. A cold certainty settled over me. Whatever was here, whatever had been watching me, was connected to this. This dog tag wasn't just a random find. It felt like a deliberate breadcrumb, a message. I looked up, scanning the surrounding trees with new eyes. The silence was absolute now, more profound than before. My own breathing sounded like a roar in my ears. The air was heavy, thick with an unseen presence. I clutched the dog tag tightly, my mind racing. This was too much. This was no longer just an eerie quiet or a vivid hallucination. This was real. This was something ancient, something forgotten, something that had been waiting. I had to get out, forget answers, forget the dog tag, just flee. My survival instinct screamed at me to turn and run, to retrace my steps as fast as possible. But another, darker impulse held me in place. The dog tag, why here, why now? Then I heard it, a sound, faint but distinct, that made my blood freeze in my veins. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was a low, resonant hum, a deep vibration that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath my feet. It was too low to be heard with my ears alone, yet I felt it vibrating through my bones, a physical sensation that resonated with an ancient primal fear. The hum grew stronger, a slow, building crescendo that felt like it was tearing at the fabric of the forest. The trees around me seemed to sway, not from wind, but from the sheer force of the vibration. The air itself began to shimmer, a distortion in my vision, like heat haze rising from asphalt, but cold, impossibly cold. Panic seized me, absolute and overwhelming. This was beyond anything I had ever encountered, anything I had ever prepared for. This was not the wilderness I knew. I scrambled backwards, dropping the dog tag, my eyes wide, darting frantically. I wanted to scream, but my throat was constricted, no sound escaping. The hum intensified, filling every cell of my body, drowning out all other thoughts, all other sensations. The shimmering in the air grew more pronounced, concentrating between the two large firs where I had found the dog tag. It was like a curtain, an invisible wall, distorting the ancient trees behind it. Then from within that shimmering distortion, a shape began to coalesce. It was dark, darker than the deepest shadow, an absence of light that seemed to suck the very illumination from the air around it. It was impossibly tall, slender, yet with a robustness that implied immense power. It had no distinct features, no discernible head or limbs, just a column of pure, unadulterated darkness, a void given form. My mind shattered. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. My eyes were playing tricks on me, sleep deprivation, hallucination. But the hum, the vibration, the absolute terror clawing at my soul, that was undeniably real. The dark shape solidified, growing more distinct, and I could feel an immense, crushing pressure in the air around it. It was an unnatural pressure, a weight that made it hard to breathe, hard to think. It was radiating pure cold, an icy dread that seeped into my very bones. It began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it stepped out from between the trees, emerging from the shimmering distortion. Each movement was fluid, graceful, yet utterly alien. It didn't walk so much as glide, its immense form drifting across the mossy ground without disturbing a single pine needle. As it moved closer, I became aware of something else. It wasn't just dark, it was absorbing light. The patches of sunlight that had dappled the forest floor seemed to dim as it passed, leaving behind a deeper shadow. It was a walking void. It stopped about 20 feet from me, its form completely blocking out the trees behind it. The hum was now a deafening roar in my head, a vibration that threatened to tear me apart. I could feel my own blood rushing in my ears, my heart hammering against my ribs, a desperate, futile attempt to escape my own body. I tried to turn to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. They were locked in place, rooted to the spot by a terror so profound it was paralyzing. My eyes were wide open, fixed on the impossible being before me, unable to look away. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth, yet I felt its gaze. I felt it penetrating my mind, stripping away my thoughts, my memories, my very sense of self. It was a cold, alien intelligence, vast and ancient, looking into the deepest parts of my being. A sensation of overwhelming despair washed over me, a feeling of utter insignificance. All my life, my accomplishments, my fears, my dreams, they were nothing, less than nothing. I was a speck, a momentary flicker in an eternity of darkness. A voice not heard with my ears but felt directly in my mind resonated within me. It was not a voice of words, but of pure thought, vast and ancient, cold and utterly devoid of emotion. You seek answers where there are none for your kind. The thought was a hammer blow driving deeper into my consciousness. I tried to resist, to push back against the intrusion, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with my bare hands. You disturb a place that hungers for silence, a silence that consumes all things. The air around me grew even colder, a palpable chill that burned my skin. The trees seemed to lean away, their ancient forms twisting as if in agony. The lake far off was a silent black mirror, reflecting only the deepening void that was the creature before me. My vision began to blur around the edges. My legs gave way and I crumpled to my knees, staring up at the incomprehensible entity. It felt like my life force was being siphoned away, slowly, steadily, leaving behind an empty husk. The creature made no physical movement, yet its presence pressed down on me, crushing me. I felt a growing understanding, a horrible, sickening realization of what it was and what it wanted. It wasn't just about silence. It was about absorption, about becoming part of the profound stillness it sought. And I was in its way. A final, crushing thought, colder than anything I had ever known, echoed in my mind, filling it entirely. You are not permitted to leave. Then the world around me began to fade, not into darkness, but into a blinding, painful light that seemed to tear at my very essence. The hum reached a crescendo, a piercing, agonizing scream that tore through my skull. My vision swam, twisting, distorting everything around me into a swirling vortex of light and shadow. I felt a terrible, wrenching sensation, as if my soul was being ripped from my body. A silent scream tore through my mind, but no sound escaped my lips. Then there was only blackness, profound, absolute, crushing blackness. I knew nothing. I felt nothing. There was no pain, no fear, no thought, just an endless, silent void. Until a flicker, a pinprick of light far off in the crushing dark. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And with it, a sensation, a cold, hard surface beneath my cheek, a sharp, metallic tang in my mouth, a dull ache throbbing somewhere deep in my skull. Consciousness, a fragile, unwelcome thing, slowly began to seep back in. I was no longer in the void. I was somewhere, and I was alive. My eyes fluttered open, but the darkness was too profound to see anything. It wasn't the pure blackness of the void, but the oppressive, heavy darkness of a place utterly devoid of light. I tried to move, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if they were made of lead. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I gagged, a dry, rasping sound in the suffocating black. Panic, cold and sharp, returned. Where was I? What had happened? The last thing I remembered was the towering, dark entity, the crushing hum, the blinding light, and then the void. I tried to push myself up, but my body refused to cooperate. I could only manage a small, trembling movement, a weak twitch of my fingers. My head was throbbing, a deep, persistent ache that made every attempt at thought a struggle. I strained my ears, trying to pierce the overwhelming silence. There was no hum now, no vibration, just a complete and utter lack of sound. It was an unnatural silence, a dead silence that was even more terrifying than the one I had encountered in the forest. This silence felt absolute, like it was pressing in on me, suffocating me. My hand, numb and clumsy, brushed against something hard and gritty, dirt, and something else, something cold and metallic. I fumbled, my fingers closing around a small, sharp edge. It was the dog tag. I must have dropped it when I fell, and it was still here, wherever here was. The fact that I was alive, that I was holding the dog tag, was a tiny, fragile anchor in the sea of terror. But it also brought back the horrifying memories, the impossible encounter, the entity that had almost absorbed me. A faint, sickly sweet smell reached my nostrils. It was subtle at first, then grew stronger, a cloying, chemical scent that made my stomach churn. It was familiar somehow, but I couldn't place it through the fog of pain and fear. I had to get light. I had to know where I was. I struggled again, forcing my muscles to obey. With a grunt of effort, I managed to push myself up onto my elbows, then slowly, agonizingly into a sitting position. My head spun, and I had to close my eyes for a moment, waiting for the wave of dizziness to pass. My backpack? Where was my backpack? My headlamp was in the top pocket. I reached out a trembling hand, blindly sweeping the area around me. My fingers brushed against fabric. Yes, my pack. With renewed, desperate strength, I fumbled with the zipper, my fingers clumsy and unresponsive. It felt like an eternity, but finally I found the headlamp. My trembling thumb found the button. I pressed it. A beam of light, weak but blindingly bright in the absolute darkness, cut through the black. I blinked, my eyes struggling to adjust, watering from the sudden assault. The first thing I saw was dirt, walls of it. My headlamp illuminated a small, enclosed space. I was in a tunnel. A narrow, claustrophobic tunnel dug out of the earth, its ceiling low, its walls rough and uneven. The air was heavy, stale, and smelled of damp earth and that sickly sweet chemical scent. I swept the beam around, my breath catching in my throat. The tunnel extended in both directions, disappearing into the darkness. There was no natural light, no opening to the sky. I was deep underground. A panic, cold and sharp, returned, tightening its grip on my throat. How had I gotten here? The entity. It had to be the entity. But why bring me here? My gaze fell to the ground directly in front of me. The dog tag, which I had been clutching, fell from my numb fingers, landing with a soft clink on a small, dark object that was half buried in the dirt. I leaned closer, directing the headlamp beam at it. It was a boot. An old, worn leather boot, still attached to what looked like a leg bone. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a boot. It was a human leg, still clad in a faded, decaying pant leg protruding from the dirt wall of the tunnel. My eyes widened in horror. I swept the headlamp further along the wall, and then I saw them. More bones, skulls, femurs, ribs, all embedded in the dirt, as if the tunnel had been dug through a mass grave. They were old, ancient, their surfaces yellowed and crumbling, but unmistakably human. The sickly sweet smell intensified, and I suddenly recognized it. The cloying scent of formaldehyde, and something else, something deeper, more ancient, the smell of decay. I scrambled backwards, bumping my head hard against the tunnel wall, sending a jolt of searing pain through my skull. My vision swam again, but the horror of what I was seeing burned into my mind. I was in a tomb, a massive, ancient tomb filled with countless human remains. The light from my headlamp flickered, then died, plunging me back into absolute darkness. The sudden onset of blackness was a physical blow, more terrifying than ever before. The smell of decay, the vision of the bones, the suffocating silence, it all crashed down on me, threatening to consume me. I pressed my hands to my face, tears streaming down my cheeks, hot against the cold skin. I was alone, deep underground, surrounded by the dead, and whatever had brought me here, that impossible, terrifying entity, was still out there. A chilling thought, cold and clear, cut through my panic. The entity had said, "You are not permitted to leave." It hadn't killed me, it had put me here, imprisoned me. And these bones, how many had been here before me, how many had not been permitted to leave? I was trapped, utterly, irrevocably trapped. The thought settled in my mind like a block of ice, chilling me to the core. This wasn't a nightmare, this was real. And my life, the one I knew, the one I took for granted, was over. The darkness that descended was absolute, a heavy shroud that smothered every sense. The cold weight of it was physical, pressing in on me, suffocating me. The memory of the bones, the sickening sweet smell of formaldehyde, the realization of my imprisonment, it all crashed down, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated horror. My hand still pressed against my face, tears mingling with sweat, hot and bitter. I was a prisoner entombed in this suffocating darkness, surrounded by the forgotten dead. The entity's chilling pronouncement echoed in my mind, "You are not permitted to leave." Panic clawed at my throat, a primal scream trapped behind frozen lips. I tried to gasp for air, but my lungs felt constricted, refusing to draw breath. My body trembled uncontrollably, every nerve ending screaming in protest. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light, it was a living, breathing entity coiling around me, whispering promises of despair. My mind, usually so resilient in the face of wilderness challenges, felt utterly broken. This wasn't a challenge, it was an annihilation. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few ragged breaths, a faint spark of something ignited within me. Not hope, not yet, but a flicker of defiance. I was still alive, and if I was alive, there was still a chance. A minuscule, terrifying, almost non-existent chance, but a chance nonetheless. I forced myself to lower my hands, wiping the tears on my sleeve. The smell of decay was overpowering now, clinging to the air, to my clothes, to my very skin. I imagined the crumbling bones, the hollow eye sockets, the silent screams of those who had come before me. The thought propelled me. I had to get out. I had to find a way. My headlamp was dead. That much was clear. I fumbled in my pack for my phone. It usually had a flashlight function. My fingers, still clumsy and shaking, scrabbled through the top pocket, past the first aid kit, past a spare battery for my camera. There, my phone. I pulled it out, its cold, smooth surface a familiar comfort in the abyss. I pressed the power button. Nothing. The screen remained stubbornly black. No battery, of course. In my haste to pack, I hadn't thought to charge it fully, assuming I'd only be out for a couple of days. Another oversight, another link in the chain of my undoing. Despair threatened to swallow me whole again. No light, no way to see, just the endless darkness and the silent company of the dead. I wanted to curl up, to surrender, to let the terror consume me. But the image of that entity, the cold, ancient intelligence, sparked a deeper, more profound anger. I wouldn't go down without a fight. My multi-tool, it had a small, useless LED light, a tiny pinprick of illumination, but it was something. I fumbled for my belt where it was usually clipped. My fingers met only empty space. No, I must have dropped it when I scrambled back from the leg bone. I remembered clutching it tightly. It must be nearby. I began to crawl forward slowly, agonizingly, hands sweeping the rough, gritty ground. Each movement sent waves of nausea through me, and my head throbbed relentlessly. My fingers brushed against loose dirt, small rocks, and what felt disturbingly like fragmented bone. I shuddered, but kept going. My only goal was light, any light. Minutes stretched into an eternity. My fingers were raw, scraped from blindly pawing at the earth. Just as I felt the last vestiges of strength draining from me, my hand closed around something cold and metallic. The dog tag, it was still there, the small piece of metal that had set this nightmare in motion. And right beside it, something heavier, the multi-tool. A surge of desperate relief, so potent it almost brought me to tears again, washed over me. I gripped the multi-tool, my thumb fumbling for the tiny button that activated the LED. With a click, a weak, bluish beam, no stronger than a nightlight, pierced the oppressive black. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to see the immediate surroundings, enough to push back the suffocating darkness by a few precious inches. The light revealed the rough, uneven walls of the tunnel, packed earth and small stones, and the bones everywhere. They protruded from the dirt, grim trophies of an unknown, ancient catastrophe. Skulls with empty eye sockets, femurs reaching out like skeletal arms, ribs forming grotesque cages. The formaldehyde smell was even stronger now, mingled with the earthy scent of decay. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I was in a tomb, a subterranean ossuary, but it was also a tunnel, and tunnels had ends. They had to. I focused the meager beam of the multi-tool light forward, peering into the gloom. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for me to crawl comfortably and too low to stand upright. I would have to proceed on my hands and knees in a space built for what? Not for men, not entirely. The dimensions felt wrong, cramped, and unsettling. "Hello," I whispered, my voice hoarse, a barely audible rasp. The sound was immediately swallowed by the dead silence, leaving only the frantic drumming of my own heart in my ears. No reply, just the mute testament of the dead. There was no choice, I had to move. Staying put meant succumbing to the terror and the crushing darkness. Moving meant a chance, however slim, however horrifying, of finding a way out. I began to crawl, the multi-tool clutched in one hand, casting its weak beam a few feet ahead. The ground was uneven, a mix of packed dirt and loose gravel. My knees protested, aching with every movement, but I ignored the pain. My focus was on the light, on the path ahead, on the desperate need to escape. As I moved, my elbow brushed against something sharp. A jolt of pain, then a sickening realization. It wasn't a rock. It was a bone, a sharp protrusion from the wall. My skin crawled. I was crawling through a graveyard, a maze of the forgotten, built into the very fabric of the earth. The air grew heavier, thicker, as I advanced. The sickly sweet smell of formaldehyde, now undeniably mixed with the musky scent of ancient earth and something else, something metallic and acrid, became overwhelming. It clung to the air like a suffocating blanket, making my lungs burn with every breath. How long had I been crawling? Minutes? Hours? Time had lost all meaning in this subterranean hell. My muscles screamed, my head throbbed, and my throat was parched. But I couldn't stop. The thought of stopping, of letting the darkness and the despair claim me, was more terrifying than continuing. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes subtly, sometimes sharply, sending me fumbling in the near darkness. Each turn brought a fresh wave of anxiety. Was I going in circles? Was this a deliberate maze designed to break the spirit, to trap forever? I paused for a moment, pressing my forehead against the cool, damp earth of the tunnel wall, trying to collect my thoughts. My mind was a jumble of fear, exhaustion, and a desperate, illogical hope. I took a few sips from my water bottle. Miraculously, it was still full and clipped to my pack, and the cool liquid was a small blessing. Then I noticed it, a faint glimmer far ahead, barely perceptible in the oppressive darkness. It wasn't the bluish light of my multi-tool. This was a warmer, softer glow, like moonlight or something much older. Hope, fragile and dangerous, surged through me. Light, real light, an exit. My heart began to pound with renewed vigor, pushing back against the fatigue. I started to crawl faster, ignoring the protests of my body, propelled by the desperate promise of escape. As I drew closer, the light grew stronger, resolving itself into a soft, ethereal luminescence. It wasn't coming from an opening. It was emanating from the tunnel itself, from the walls, the ceiling, the very earth. The glow pulsed gently, a faint, almost living light, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to twist and writhe. It was beautiful in a haunting, alien way, and utterly terrifying. The bones around me, bathed in this unnatural light, took on a grotesque, almost sentient quality. The empty eye sockets seemed to stare, the skeletal fingers to beckon. The air grew colder, the chemical smell intensified, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum began to vibrate through the earth beneath my hands and knees. No, not again, the hum. My blood ran cold. This wasn't an escape. This was something else. I forced myself to keep moving, drawn by the strange light, by the terrifying familiarity of the hum. As I rounded a final bend, the tunnel opened up dramatically. It wasn't a cave nor an exit to the outside. It was a vast circular chamber, far larger than anything I had anticipated, easily 50 feet in diameter, its ceiling lost in the gloom above the pulsing, phosphorescent glow. The walls of the chamber were not rough earth like the tunnel. They were smooth, seamlessly joined blocks of dark, crystalline rock radiating the eerie light. The floor was also made of the same dark stone, polished to a mirror-like sheen. And everywhere embedded in the walls, the floor, the colossal pillars that supported the unseen ceiling were bones. Thousands upon thousands of them, arranged in intricate, horrifying patterns, forming murals of death and decay. The skulls peered out from geometric designs, rib cages formed arches, and femurs created support structures. It was an art gallery of the dead, constructed with a deliberate, chilling precision. In the very center of this macabre chamber, a single, towering monolith of the same dark, glowing rock stood sentinel. It was at least 30 feet tall, tapering to a sharp, needle-like point that disappeared into the shadows above, and on its surface, etched into the smooth, dark crystal, were symbols. Not hieroglyphs, not ancient languages I recognized. These were alien geometric patterns that seemed to shift and reconfigure as I looked at them, impossible shapes that defied my understanding, yet resonated with a deep, ancient power. The hum was much stronger here, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through my entire body, rattling my teeth, blurring my vision. It was the same hum I had felt just before the entity appeared, but amplified, immense, overwhelming. The air was thick with the chemical scent, and now something else, a cold, metallic tang like ozone after a lightning strike. My gaze was drawn to the monolith. It was the source of the light, the hum, the chilling presence that filled the chamber. As I stared, transfixed, a faint, almost imperceptible distortion shimmered around its base, like heat haze but cold, the same distortion I had seen between the trees. My mind, already stretched to its breaking point, began to unravel further. This was not a natural place. This was a construct, an impossible architecture of death and alien technology buried deep beneath the ancient forest. Then the shimmering intensified, and from within it, the dark shape began to coalesce again. It was slower this time, as if drawing on the energy of the monolith itself. The void-like entity, taller than anything natural, darker than any shadow, began to solidify, absorbing the light, the very air around it. It grew from the ground, a column of absolute blackness, radiating a cold so profound it felt like my skin was burning. Panic, fresh and absolute, seized me. My legs, still weak and aching from crawling, tried to push me backwards, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by terror. My multi-tool slipped from my grasp, falling with a clatter that was immediately swallowed by the growing hum. The entity solidified completely, standing before the monolith, its immense form dwarfing everything else in the chamber. It had no discernible features, no face, no limbs, yet its presence was overwhelming, a crushing weight that stole my breath, my thoughts, my very will to resist. And then the voice, not in my ears, but directly in my mind, colder, clearer, more ancient than before. You have returned to the heart. Your kind seeks truth, but finds only reflection. The words were a direct intrusion, bypassing my defenses, resonating deep within my consciousness. My head throbbed, a searing pain behind my eyes. I tried to scream, to lash out, but my body was unresponsive, a puppet on broken strings. The vessel is weak, the fear strong, yet a spark remains. What vessel, what spark? My mind raced, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. The monolith, the bones, the entity, it was all connected. This wasn't just a tomb, it was something far, far worse. The entity began to move, gliding slowly towards me across the polished stone floor. Its movement was utterly silent, graceful, yet filled with an ominous power that made my stomach churn. Each step, if it could be called a step, seemed to draw the very light from the chamber, creating deeper, more profound shadows in its wake. As it drew closer, the hum intensified, shifting in pitch, transforming into a low, mournful wail that vibrated through every cell of my body. It was a song of desolation, of endless yearning, of ultimate hunger. And then the despair, the overwhelming, soul-crushing despair that had engulfed me in the forest returned, magnified 1,000-fold. It wasn't just an emotion, it was a physical force pressing down on me, trying to extinguish the last flicker of my will. All hope, all meaning, all purpose seemed to drain away, leaving behind only emptiness. We have waited for centuries, for millennia, for the convergence. The thought echoed in my mind, vast and ancient. Convergence? What convergence? My mind, in a desperate attempt to grasp at something rational, thought of celestial alignments, of ancient prophecies, of forgotten calendars. But this was beyond human understanding. As the entity stopped directly in front of me, its immense form towering over me, a new sensation overwhelmed the despair. It was a profound, suffocating sorrow. Not my sorrow, but something vast and ancient, emanating from the entity itself, from the very core of this impossible place. It was the sorrow of endless waiting, of countless consumed lives, of a yearning that would never be fulfilled. And with it came an understanding, horrifying and undeniable. This entity, this void-given form, was not just a being, it was a guardian, a collector. And this chamber, this temple of bones, was its repository. The ones who had not been permitted to leave were all here. Their lives, their essences, absorbed into this place, into this entity. My gaze, fixed on the shimmering form before me, suddenly caught a flicker, a fleeting distortion within the absolute blackness. It wasn't a feature, not a shape, but a momentary shift, like a ripple in dark water. And in that ripple I saw them. Faces, millions of faces, swirling, twisting, forming and dissolving within the void. Faces of men and women, young and old, their eyes wide with a silent, eternal scream. They were the absorbed, the consumed. The ones who had been here before me. My own face, reflected in the shifting darkness of the entity, appeared for a split second, my eyes wide with terror. I was one of them. I was already part of it. Do you understand now? The silence, the hunger, the absorption. The thought was a caress, cold and terrible, probing the deepest recesses of my mind. It wasn't just a physical death it inflicted. It was an erasure, a complete and utter consumption of one's being, leaving no trace, no memory, no echo. I tried to fight, to scream, to claw my way back from the brink of oblivion, but my body remained frozen, my mind trapped in a cage of alien understanding. The sorrow, the despair, the overwhelming presence of the absorbed all threatened to tear me apart. Then a sudden, blinding flash of light erupted from the monolith behind the entity. Not the soft, phosphorescent glow, but a searing, white-hot burst that illuminated the entire chamber, making the ancient bones on the walls seem to scream silently. The hum intensified to an unbearable pitch, a tearing, agonizing sound that felt like it was ripping my eardrums apart, vibrating through my very soul. The entity recoiled slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in its form, as if struck by an invisible force. The sorrow radiating from it was replaced by a surge of pure, raw anguish, a pain so profound it was almost human. And then a new voice piercing through the cacophony of the hum and the entity's mental intrusions. It was human. Harsh, guttural, but undeniably human. "Get back, you bastard." The sound was like a gunshot in the alien silence of the chamber. My eyes, watering from the light and the pain, snapped towards the source. Standing at the entrance of the tunnel, silhouetted against the faint phosphorescence of the passageway, was a figure, a man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in what looked like faded, modern outdoor gear. He was holding something in his hands, something long and metallic, pointed directly at the entity. A rifle. He wasn't alone. Behind him, another figure, shorter, nimbler, moved into view, carrying a backpack and what looked like some kind of strange, glowing device. My mind, still reeling from the entity's presence, struggled to process this sudden, impossible intrusion. Other people here, how? The entity, for the first time, seemed to react with something akin to surprise or perhaps annoyance. Its form shimmered, and the despair radiating from it sharpened into a cold, focused anger. Intruders, uninvited, unacceptable. The thought hammered into my mind, laced with a chilling fury. "You speak in my head too, you freak," the first man growled, taking another step forward. His rifle was steady, aimed directly at the shimmering mass. "Didn't think so. That's for the weak ones, isn't it? For the ones you want to absorb whole." The second figure, the shorter one, quickly moved to my side. He was older, his face etched with deep lines, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, filled with an unsettling intensity. He wore a utility belt laden with strange instruments. "Are you all right, son?" he asked, his voice low and urgent, his hands quickly assessing me. He didn't wait for an answer, already pulling out a small, metallic device from his belt. It looked like a complicated scanner with an array of blinking lights and a small, glowing screen. He swept it over me. "High psychic residue, trace absorption markers. He's been heavily exposed," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "But he's still intact. Good, get him out, Ben, I'll cover you. Ben, that was the name of the man with the rifle. He didn't need to be told twice. He nodded, his eyes never leaving the entity. All right, kids, let's go. He reached down, grabbing my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, pulling me to my feet. My legs were like jelly, threatening to collapse beneath me. The entity, now fully focused on the new arrivals, began to expand, its dark form swelling, radiating an immense, crushing pressure. The hum deepened, becoming a throbbing, agonizing pulse that vibrated through the very stones of the chamber. The glowing symbols on the monolith behind it flared, pulsing with an angry, crimson light. You will not interfere. This one is ours. This place is sacred. The thought slammed into my mind, so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. Sacred to what? Your twisted cult of oblivion, Ben scoffed, taking careful aim. You're a leech, a parasite, and this time you're not getting another one. With a sudden, violent crack, Ben fired his rifle. The sound, deafening in the enclosed space, echoed through the chamber, making me flinch. A bolt of incandescent energy, not a bullet, erupted from the barrel, streaking towards the entity. The entity shifted, its form rippling, and the energy bolt seemed to pass through it, momentarily distorting its shape, but not harming it. It was like shooting at smoke. Futile, your primitive weapons cannot harm that which is not of your dimension. The entity's voice echoed with disdain in my mind. Primitive, huh? Ben grinned, a grim, determined expression on his face. Maybe, but sometimes primitive works. He fired again, another bolt of energy tearing through the air, this time aimed at the monolith behind the entity. The bolt struck the glowing crystal with a deafening impact, sending shards of dark, crystalline rock exploding across the chamber. The monolith shuddered, and the crimson light emanating from its symbols flickered, momentarily dimming. The hum faltered, a discordant whine replacing its powerful thrum. The entity let out a soundless scream that ripped through my mind, a shriek of pure, unadulterated agony. Its form writhed, twisting and contracting as if in immense pain. The faces swirling within it flashed, their silent screams now etched with an ancient, unbearable suffering. That's more like it, Ben yelled, firing again, another bolt slamming into the damaged monolith. More shards exploded, and a fissure, radiating angry, dark energy, appeared on its surface. It's not just the entity, kid, it's the anchor. The monolith is what ties it here, what allows it to draw energy from this nexus. The older man, still beside me, explained, his eyes fixed on the unfolding battle. These places, these ancient, forgotten places, they often contain such convergences, where the veil between worlds is thin, and sometimes something comes through, something hungry. He pulled a small, glowing orb from his belt, about the size of a golf ball, and hurled it towards the struggling entity. The orb flew true, impacting the entity's shimmering form with a burst of white light and a crackle of static electricity. The entity shrieked again, its form recoiling violently. The despair it radiated was now mixed with terror, a primal fear that was almost palpable. The hum, which had faltered, now became a desperate, high-pitched whine. "My turn," the older man exclaimed, pulling me roughly forward, dragging me towards the damaged monolith. "It's drawing too much power. We need to disrupt the convergence." Ben continued to fire, his energy blasts tearing into the monolith, widening the fissure. The entity, its dark form flickering, seemed torn between attacking us and defending its anchor. "What do I do?" I managed to croak, my voice raw, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. "You get out of here," the older man yelled, pushing me towards a different, wider tunnel entrance I hadn't noticed before, located behind a colossal pillar of bones. "This tunnel leads to a more stable egress point. Follow the lights and don't look back." He shoved me towards the opening. "Go now." I hesitated for a split second, my eyes darting between the battling figures and the writhing, dark entity. The raw power, the terror, the impossibility of it all was overwhelming. But the urgency in the old man's voice was undeniable. My survival instincts, battered but still alive, screamed at me to obey. I stumbled into the tunnel, my legs still shaking, my eyes straining to see in the dim, pulsing light. This tunnel was wider, taller, and less cluttered with bones, though they still lined the walls in eerie patterns. And just as the man had said, faint, small, glowing markers like luminous fungi dotted the floor at regular intervals, guiding the way. Behind me, the chamber erupted in a cacophony of sound. Another energy blast, a deeper shriek from the entity, and Ben's guttural yell. The hum was tearing at the fabric of the air itself, the very earth trembling. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my boots. I didn't dare look back. I forced myself to move, one agonizing step after another, following the glowing markers. The tunnel sloped upwards, a gradual, relentless climb. The air grew slightly cooler, fresher, tinged with the scent of damp earth and something else, something faintly green. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed, but I pushed on. Each glowing marker was a beacon, a promise of escape. The sounds from the chamber behind me slowly began to fade, replaced by the amplified sound of my own ragged breathing and the frantic drumming of my heart. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes, the tunnel widened further. The glowing markers ended abruptly, and ahead, a faint, undeniable sliver of natural light appeared. Not the eerie phosphorescence of the chamber, but the muted, indifferent gray of a cloudy afternoon. Tears, hot and sudden, streamed down my face. Natural light, fresh air, a way out. Hope, real, tangible hope, surged through me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. I stumbled out of the tunnel mouth, blinking against the sudden, albeit dim, light. I was on a hillside, steep and thickly forested, nestled between ancient trees. The air was cool, damp, and smelled gloriously of pine and wet earth. A bird chirped somewhere in the distance. The world was normal again. I collapsed onto the soft, mossy ground, gasping for breath, my body shaking uncontrollably. My mind, however, was not normal. It was a chaotic mess of impossible images, alien sensations, and the chilling echoes of a presence that defied all logic. My backpack, it was still on my back miraculously, and the multi-tool was still clutched in my hand. I looked at it, then back at the dark, narrow opening of the tunnel, now almost hidden by thick undergrowth. It was as if the earth had simply opened up and swallowed the horror within. The sounds from below had vanished completely. Only the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees and the distant calls of birds remained. Had they succeeded? Had they destroyed the entity or its anchor? Or had they simply bought me time? A new wave of nausea washed over me, and I emptied the contents of my stomach onto the forest floor, a visceral purge of the terror and the unspeakable things I had witnessed. When it was over, I lay there, trembling, exhausted, but alive. I stayed there for a long time, curled on the moss, trying to ground myself in the familiar reality of the forest. The sun, which had been setting when I emerged, was now low in the sky, casting long shadows. I had lost an entire day, or more. Time was still a jumble. Gradually, shakily, I pushed myself up. I needed to move. I needed to get away from this place, as far away as possible. My sense of direction was still intact, a small comfort. I knew which way was west, which way led back to the lake and hopefully to my car. I started walking, slowly at first, then with a growing urgency. My body ached, my head still throbbed, but the need to escape, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that subterranean horror, propelled me forward. I didn't care about my original trail or getting lost. I just needed to move. The forest was silent in a new way now. Not the oppressive, unnatural silence of the entity, but the natural quiet of a wild place filled with unseen life, with the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of creatures. It was a comforting silence, a familiar one. But I knew it was a lie. I knew now that there were things in this world, under this world, that defied understanding. Things that lurked in the deep places, waiting. I walked for hours, pushing my exhausted body past its limits, fueled by adrenaline and the desperate need for safety. The sun dipped below the horizon and dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. The forest began to grow dark again, but this time I welcomed the encroaching night. It was a familiar darkness, not the crushing void of the tunnel. Just as the last vestiges of twilight faded, I stumbled upon a faint, overgrown path. It was narrow, choked with underbrush, but it was unmistakably a trail. My heart leaped. My original trail, the one I had followed in. I followed it with renewed vigor, knowing that it would eventually lead me back to the gravel Forest Service road. My car, safety, a return to the world I knew. It was almost midnight when I finally saw it. The dim outline of my Subaru Forester, parked exactly where I'd left it, a lonely sentinel at the unofficial trailhead. The sight was like a miracle, a beacon of normalcy in a world turned upside down. I staggered to the car, fumbling with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key into the lock. It clicked open. I practically fell into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut, locking it with a desperate click. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, gasping for breath, tears of exhaustion and relief streaming down my face. I was out. I was safe. But as I sat there, the engine still off, the silence of the car broken only by my ragged breathing, I knew I wasn't truly safe. Not anymore. The world had changed, and so had I. My eyes drifted to the rearview mirror. In the faint moonlight filtering through the trees, I thought I saw it. A brief, fleeting distortion in the air, deep within the forest, just beyond the tree line. A shimmer like heat haze, cold and ominous. Or maybe it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my terrified imagination. I gripped the steering wheel, forcing myself to turn the key. The engine roared to life, a comforting, familiar sound that chased away the lingering shadows. I put the car in reverse, backing out onto the gravel road, then shifted into drive. I sped away, leaving the ancient, haunted forest behind, the crunch of gravel under my tires a frantic rhythm against the chaotic pounding of my heart. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The drive out was a blur. My mind was still reeling, a jumble of images and sensations. The silence, the dark shape, the tunnel of bones, the glowing monolith, the two mysterious men, the unbearable hum. It was too much, too impossible. I drove through the night, not stopping until the first faint streaks of dawn appeared on the horizon, illuminating the familiar highway signs that marked the approach to civilization. Gas stations, diners, scattered houses, the mundane reality of the everyday world. I pulled into a rest stop, parking in a deserted corner, too exhausted to drive another inch. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, drawn, my eyes wide and bloodshot, haunted by things no human should ever see. My hair was matted, my clothes stained with dirt and dried mud. I looked like a ghost. My fingers, still trembling, reached into my pocket. The dog tag. It was still there, cold and metallic against my skin. I pulled it out, turning it over in my palm. The tarnished metal, the etched name, the Vietnam-era dates. It was tangible proof. Proof that it wasn't a dream, that it had all been real. I thought of the two men, Ben with his energy rifle, the older man with his strange devices. Who were they? How did they know? And what was their connection to this ancient, hungry thing beneath the forest? They had saved me, but they had also left me with more questions than answers. The thought of reporting this, of trying to explain to anyone what I had seen, was laughable. They would lock me up, label me insane. I was alone in this, absolutely alone. I made it home a few hours later, pulling into my driveway just as the morning rush hour was beginning. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt alien and cold. I went through the motions of showering, changing, trying to scrub away the dirt, the smell, the lingering dread, but it was useless. The stains were deeper than skin. I called in sick to work, claiming a sudden, severe flu. My voice was raspy, my body aching, so it wasn't a complete lie. I spent the next few days in a haze, barely eating, sleeping fitfully, plagued by nightmares that replayed the horror of the tunnel, the chilling presence of the entity, the silent screams of the absorbed. I tried to rationalize it, to find a scientific explanation. Mass hallucination, a rare geological phenomenon combined with extreme sleep deprivation. But no logic, no scientific principle could explain the telepathic communication, the void-like entity, the glowing monolith, the impossible bones, or the two mysterious, heavily armed men. Slowly, painfully, I began to piece together a new reality. A world where ancient, impossible things lurked beneath the surface. A world where a hunger older than humanity waited in forgotten places. I kept the dog tag. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It was a memento, a grim souvenir of my encounter with the impossible, and it was a reminder. A constant, chilling reminder that I had seen the edge of the abyss and something had looked back. Months turned into a year. The nightmares faded into a dull ache, a background hum in my consciousness. I returned to work, tried to resume my life, but the old me, the confident, wilderness-loving photographer, was gone. Replaced by someone who flinched at sudden silence, who scanned shadows with a nervous eye, who felt a profound, unsettling dread whenever the stars were too bright. I stopped taking solo trips into the wilderness. The thought of being alone in the vast, untamed places where the veil between worlds might be thin was unbearable. My camera gathered dust. My hiking boots remained in the closet. I traded the solitude of the forest for the crowded, noisy anonymity of city life. My small apartment in Portland, once a convenient base for my outdoor adventures, became my refuge. I sold my Forester, the sight of it too reminiscent of that terrifying night, and bought a used sedan, unremarkable and unassuming. My camera, once an extension of my identity, stayed locked in its case. The wilderness, which had once called to me with the promise of peace and beauty, now whispered only of ancient horrors and the crushing silence of the abyss. I found a new job, a desk job, processing digital archives for a local historical society. It was tedious, mind-numbing work, but it was safe. It kept me indoors, surrounded by the comforting, tangible history of human endeavor, far removed from the unfathomable depths I had glimpsed. My colleagues were friendly enough, their concerns mundane and predictable: traffic, office politics, weekend plans. I became adept at superficial conversations, at hiding the vast, gaping chasm that now lay between my internal world and theirs. I smiled, I nodded, I offered platitudes, all the while feeling like an alien observing humanity from behind an impenetrable barrier. Sleep was still a battleground. The nightmares, though less frequent, were more insidious. They were no longer crude replays of the tunnel or the entity. They were subtle distortions of reality, shifting shadows at the periphery of my vision, sudden drops in temperature, the faint, sickening, sweet scent of formaldehyde wafting from unexpected places. I'd wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding, the absolute silence of my apartment almost as terrifying as the hum. I started sleeping with a small, cheap radio playing static, or a white noise app on my phone, anything to fill the oppressive quiet. The dog tag became my secret burden. I kept it in a small, velvet pouch hidden in the deepest drawer of my dresser. Sometimes, late at night, when the city was quiet and the old terrors crept in, I'd take it out. The tarnished metal felt cold, heavy, a tangible anchor to an impossible truth. I'd trace the etched letters, the name, Sergeant Thomas E. Vance, serial number, blood type, a real person, a person who had been in that place, perhaps long before me. It was a fragment of a life, a ghost of a story, and I, unwillingly, had become its custodian. I tried in my own way to find answers, not by returning to the forest, never that, but through the safe, sterile channels of the internet. I researched ancient cults, forgotten civilizations, geological anomalies, paranormal phenomena. I searched for anything that could remotely explain what I had witnessed. I delved into conspiracy theories, folklore, forgotten texts. It was a desperate, clandestine education conducted in the dead of night, fueled by coffee and annoying dread. I found whispers of skinwalkers, shadow people, interdimensional beings, terms that before I would have scoffed at. Now they resonated with a chilling familiarity. I also tried to find anything about unusual events in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. News archives, local forums, obscure blogs, nothing. No disappearances, no strange phenomena reported by other hikers, nothing to corroborate my sanity. It was as if the forest held its secrets close, or perhaps the things that happened there left no conventional traces. My searches, however, led me down darker, more complex rabbit holes. I stumbled upon forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena, where people shared stories of encounters with beings that resembled my description, tall, dark, light-absorbing entities that communicated telepathically and induced immense fear or despair. They called them void walkers or shadow weavers. Most of the stories were dismissed as fiction, hoaxes, or mental illness. but a few, told with an undeniable ring of truth, sent shivers down my spine. The consistency of the descriptions, the shared terror, the sense of ancient malevolence, it was too close to ignore. One particular thread caught my attention. It spoke of nexus points, places where the veil between dimensions was thin, allowing such entities to cross over. These nexus points were often described as ancient, sacred sites, sometimes marked by megalithic structures or strange geological formations. The forum user who went by the handle Watcher7 claimed that these entities were drawn to fear, to despair, that they fed on it, and that their ultimate goal was absorption. My blood ran cold. You are not permitted to leave. A silence that consumes all things, the hunger, the absorption. The entity's words echoed in my mind. It wasn't just fear, it was a way of being. Watcher7's posts were incredibly detailed, almost scientific in their approach, yet laced with a palpable sense of urgency and dread. He spoke of ancient anchors that tethered these beings to our reality, and how disrupting them was the only way to drive the entities back. He also mentioned specialized teams who secretly worked to contain these threats to maintain the balance. My heart leaped. Specialized teams. Ben, the older man, could Watcher7 be talking about them? This was the first concrete lead, however tenuous, to the mysterious men who had saved me. I spent hours poring over Watcher7's archives, searching for any clue, any hint of their identity or organization. He never gave specifics, always speaking in veiled terms, citing the need for secrecy. But he did mention old knowledge passed down through generations and ancient orders dedicated to protecting humanity from these interdimensional incursions. The more I read, the more a new, terrifying picture began to form. The world wasn't just forests and mountains, cities and people. It was a fragile membrane stretched over something ancient and vast, something that lurked just beyond our perception, waiting for cracks, for weakness, for opportunities to cross over. And there were people, ordinary people, who knew about it, who fought a hidden war to keep us safe, ignorant. One night, driven by a desperate need for connection, for someone who understood, I decided to take a risk. I drafted a message to Watcher7, carefully omitting any specific details that could be traced back to me, but describing my encounter in the Gifford Pinchot in as much detail as I dared. I spoke of the hum, the darkness, the absorption, the monolith, and the two men. I ended it with a plea for information, for understanding. I hit send, then immediately regretted it. What if Watcher7 was a crackpot? What if I had just exposed myself to more danger? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, my mind racing with doubt and a renewed sense of vulnerability. The reply came 2 days later. It was brief, concise, and chilling. The Gifford Pinchot is a known nexus. The entity you describe is an old one, a true void walker, powerful. The fact you survived absorption is rare. The two individuals you encountered were likely part of a containment unit. They are highly compartmentalized. Finding them will be difficult, perhaps dangerous. Your survival indicates a unique resonance. The void walkers are drawn to certain individuals, those with an innate spark. Be careful. The incident may have marked you. It will know you survived. It will seek you out. The last sentence sent a cold dread through me. It will know you survived. It will seek you out. The anonymity of the city, my safe, mundane job, my carefully constructed walls, they were all an illusion. The entity was still out there, and it was looking for me. I was marked. A new kind of terror settled in, not the sudden, overwhelming panic of the immediate encounter, but a slow, insidious fear that gnawed at me from the inside out. I was a target. Living in the open, even in a city, felt like living in a glass house. I deleted my account on the forum, scrubbed my browsing history, and tried to forget Watcher7's warning. but the words were seared into my mind. I began to see shadows in every corner, to hear whispers in the wind. Every stranger felt like a potential threat, every sudden silence a prelude to the hum. My paranoia escalated. I installed deadbolts, checked my windows obsessively, and started carrying a knife, a pathetic, useless gesture against a being that scoffed at bullets. The dog tag, once a morbid curiosity, now felt like a living thing, a hot coal in my pocket. Sergeant Thomas E. Vance. He was marked too, or had been. What had happened to him? Had he been rescued like me? Or had he been absorbed, his dog tag merely a forgotten relic of a life consumed? The thought haunted me. If the entity knew I survived, did it know where I was, and how long would it take to find me? One evening, about 6 months after receiving Watcher 7's reply, I was walking home from work. The city was bustling, alive with the sounds of traffic, distant sirens, and the chatter of pedestrians. I hugged the shadows, my eyes constantly scanning, a nervous tic I couldn't shake. As I passed a darkened alley, a sudden, sharp cold descended. Not just the chill of the evening air, but that impossible, bone-deep cold. The air shimmered almost imperceptibly at the far end of the alley, between an overflowing dumpster and a brick wall. My heart leaped into my throat. No, not here, not in the city. I froze, my breath catching. The familiar dread, the crushing weight of its presence, began to build. It was faint, distant, but undeniable. The entity was here, or something connected to it. A low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the asphalt beneath my feet, too low for human ears, but screaming through my bones. My vision blurred at the edges. My legs, once again, threatened to give out. Panic, raw and absolute, seized me. I wanted to run, to scream, but the alley was dark, a trap. And the entity, even if it was just a shadow of its true power, was still beyond anything I could comprehend. Then, just as the shimmering began to coalesce, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. I whirled around, a strangled cry caught in my throat, my knife already in my hand. It was Ben, the man with the energy rifle. His face was grim, unsmiling. "Don't even think about it, kid," he said, his voice low and urgent, his eyes fixed on the alley. "It's still weak, just a probe, it's testing the waters." Behind him, the older man, whose name I still didn't know, emerged from the shadows of a nearby doorway. He held his glowing scanner, its lights blinking erratically, a low whirring sound emanating from it. "He's right," the older man said, his voice calm, almost clinical. "A residual projection, tracing you. Remarkable that it managed to manifest even this much, this far from a nexus." He looked at me, his gaze piercing. "Watcher 7 was right about your resonance." My mind reeled. They had found me. They knew. "You're Watcher 7, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The older man gave a slight, wry smile. "Among other things, you were rather insistent in your query, and your description of the events was too accurate to ignore. We've been keeping an eye on you since." "An eye on me?" I retorted, a surge of anger cutting through my terror. "You left me to deal with this. You saved me, then dumped me back into the world to be hunted." "We saved you, yes," Ben interjected, his voice firm, "because you were collateral damage. But we couldn't just tell you about everything. It's classified for your own protection and for the protection of others." He gestured vaguely at the bustling street. "But it found me," I cried, gesturing wildly towards the shimmering in the alley, which, as they spoke, seemed to be receding, fading back into the darkness. The cold lessened, the hum died down. It was gone, for now. "It tracked your unique energetic signature," the older man explained, lowering his scanner. The absorption process, even incomplete, leaves an indelible mark. Like a scent for a predator, it imprinted on you, and you, in turn, imprinted on its anchor. The dog tag, it helped. It created a tether. I looked down at my hand, still clutching the dog tag. So it's my fault. No, Ben said, a surprising softness in his voice. It's just how these things work. You stumbled into something ancient and powerful. Most people don't survive. You did. That makes you special and dangerous to it and potentially to yourself. My name is Dr. Elias Thorne, the older man said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. And this is Ben Carter. We work for an organization. Let's call it the Protectors of the Veil. The Protectors of the Veil. The name felt both ridiculous and terrifyingly apt. We couldn't reach out to you directly after the incident, Thorne continued. Standard protocol. Amnesiacs are the safest option usually, but your resonance, as I said, complicated things. And then your message to Watcher 7, it showed you weren't going to let it go, and that the entity was already tracking you. We decided it was time to intervene properly. Intervene how? I asked, my mind still reeling. What do you want from me? Ben stepped closer, his expression serious. We want to offer you a choice, kid. Go back to your normal life and we'll do our best to run interference, obscure your signature, try to throw it off your trail. It's not a guarantee. It might find you again, or you come with us, learn, fight, and maybe, just maybe, make a difference. Fight what? This thing, you shot it with an energy rifle and it barely flinched. I exclaimed, the sheer absurdity of the situation almost making me laugh hysterically. You saw it flinch when we hit its anchor, Thorne corrected. These beings, they aren't physical in the way we understand. They exist in a state between dimensions, but they need anchors, conduits, to fully manifest in our reality. The monolith in the Gifford Pinchot was one such anchor. If you hit the anchor, you hit the entity. That's how we send them back, or at least wound them enough to retreat. So you want me to join your secret society of paranormal exterminators? I asked, skepticism warring with a desperate need for answers, for safety. Thorne smiled, a genuine, if weary, smile. Something like that. We could use someone with your unique experience, and your resonance might even be a weapon if properly harnessed. The Void Walkers are drawn to you, but that also means you might be able to draw them out to where we can engage them. You'd be on the front lines, yes, but you'd also be surrounded by people who understand, who can protect you, who can teach you. My mind raced. The idea of going back to my normal life, haunted and terrified, was unbearable. I was already living a half-life, a shadow of my former self. And the entity was still out there, searching for me. Could they really protect me? Could I really fight something so impossible? But the alternative was solitary terror, a slow descent into madness. This, at least, offered agency. A chance to understand, to fight back, to reclaim some semblance of control over my own destiny. I looked at Ben, then at Thorne. Their faces were etched with weariness, but also with an unwavering resolve. They weren't crazy. They were soldiers in a war I hadn't known existed. What about Sergeant Vance? I asked, holding up the dog tag. Did he join you? Thorne's smile faded. Sergeant Vance was one of ours, yes, a long time ago. He was a pioneer in understanding the Gifford Pinchot nexus. He perished there, fighting the Void Walker, trying to seal its anchor. We thought he had succeeded. His dog tag, it's a powerful memento, a reminder of the sacrifices we make, and perhaps a connection, a key even. My gaze fell on the dog tag, then back to the fading traces of shimmering air in the alley. The cold was almost gone now, the city sounds returning to their normal volume. But I knew it wasn't truly gone. What do I have to lose? I murmured, more to myself than to them. My life is already gone. Ben clapped me on the shoulder, a firm, reassuring gesture. You have a new life to gain, kid, a chance to fight for something real. Thorn nodded. It won't be easy, it will be dangerous, but you won't be alone, and you'll learn things that will change your perception of the universe forever. I looked at my apartment building, a safe, mundane haven that no longer felt safe. I looked at the bustling street, at the unsuspecting faces of the people passing by, oblivious to the hidden war being waged beneath their very feet. And then I looked at Ben and Thorn, two quiet, unassuming men who stood as a bulwark against an ancient, hungry darkness. All right, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I'm in, tell me everything. Thorn's smile returned, a flicker of grim satisfaction. Excellent, we have much to discuss, but first let's get you somewhere safe, somewhere truly safe. He gestured to a nondescript black van parked a little further down the street, its windows tinted. It looked like any other commercial vehicle, blending seamlessly into the urban landscape. Another layer of the protectors of the veil, hidden in plain sight. I followed them, my heart pounding, a strange mix of fear and exhilaration surging through me. My old life was truly over. A new, terrifying, impossible one was about to begin. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something other than despair. I was no longer just a victim, I was a recruit. The inside of the van was surprisingly spacious, filled with an array of blinking screens, complex consoles, and secured compartments. Thorn took the driver's seat while Ben sat in the back with me, opposite a large, illuminated map that displayed various geographical anomalies, some marked with pulsing red dots. One of them, I noticed with a jolt, was directly over the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. Welcome to the Protectors of the Veil, protagonist's name, Thorn said, his voice calm and professional as he started the engine. Your training begins now. For the next few weeks, my life became a blur of intense, often surreal education. Thorn and Ben, along with a rotating cast of other agents, quiet, focused individuals, all with the same haunted eyes I now possessed, became my instructors. I learned about dimensional rifts, etheric resonance, and entropic beings. I was introduced to a lexicon of the impossible, a scientific framework for the supernatural. They explained that void walkers, or absorbers as they often called them, were not evil in a human sense, but simply an alien form of life that sustained itself by consuming consciousness, memory, and emotion. They were like cosmic sponges, drawn to places where the fabric of reality was thin, where the veil was weak, and humanity's inherent spark of sentience provided a potent, irresistible meal. The nexus points, like the one in the Gifford-Pinchot, were specific geographical locations where the veil was naturally compromised, often due to ancient ley lines, unique geological formations, or even forgotten rituals performed by early human civilizations who had glimpsed the truth and misinterpreted it. These entities don't operate on our timeline or our understanding of space, Thorn explained during one of our theory sessions, gesturing at a complex diagram on a holographic display. They exist in a state of flux in the between. When they anchor to our dimension, they can only manifest fully in places of significant energetic or psychic resonance, and when they do, they feed, they grow. and they expand their influence, creating echoes of their presence, like the one that found you in the alley. I learned about the different types of anchors, monoliths like the one I had seen, but also ancient trees, geothermal vents, even certain forgotten artifacts imbued with immense psychic energy. The goal of the protectors, they explained, was to identify these nexus points, monitor them, and when an incursion occurred, to either contain the entity or, if necessary, disrupt its anchor and force it back to its own dimension. It's a constant war fought in the shadows, Ben told me one evening, cleaning his energy rifle in the back of the van. We were parked in a remote, abandoned warehouse, our temporary base. Most of humanity sleeps peacefully, oblivious, and that's how it has to be. Imagine the panic if everyone knew what lurks just beyond the static on their TVs. My training wasn't just theoretical. I was put through grueling physical conditioning, designed to sharpen my reflexes, improve my endurance, and harden my body. I learned hand-to-hand combat, stealth techniques, and how to navigate treacherous terrain, both natural and urban, under extreme conditions. The memories of my previous life as a wilderness photographer, though still painful, sometimes surprisingly helped. My innate sense of direction, my ability to read the environment, my resilience, these were skills that, in this new context, suddenly became invaluable. But the most challenging part of my training was learning to control, and more importantly, shield my resonance. Thorne believed that my survival, and the entity's continued fascination with me, meant I had an unusually strong psychic signature, a spark that made me both a beacon and a target. He taught me meditation techniques, focusing exercises, and mental shielding protocols designed to obscure my presence from entities that sensed consciousness. It was like learning to build a mental fortress, brick by painful brick. The Void Walker wants to finish what it started, Thorne explained, his eyes fixed on me during one of these sessions. It tasted your essence and it found it delectable, but your resistance, your tenacity also intrigued it. It's a hunter and you, my friend, are its prize. We need to turn that into an advantage. They began to test my resonance. Using various devices, they would monitor my psychic fluctuations, my emotional responses. They discovered that when I focused on the dog tag, my resonance would spike dramatically. The object, Thorne theorized, was not just a memento, but an artifact that had been exposed to the entity's full power, a conduit. Sergeant Vance, Thorne mused, holding the dog tag carefully with gloved hands. He was a formidable individual. His essence, his memories, may still be partially imprinted on this tag, perhaps even a fragment of his will. The Void Walker senses this. It's drawn to it like a homing beacon, and now it's drawn to you because you possess it. This knowledge was a double-edged sword. It confirmed my horrifying connection to the entity, but it also offered a potential weapon. Thorne believed that with enough training I could learn to project my resonance, to use it as bait or even as a disruptive force against the Void Walker. It was a terrifying prospect, but the thought of being able to fight back, to no longer be a helpless victim, was a powerful motivator. One night, several months into my training, Ben and Thorne sat me down. The atmosphere was somber. "We have a situation," Thorne began, his voice devoid of his usual calm scientific detachment. "A new incursion. This one is significant." "Where's?" I asked, my heart already pounding. "Oregon," Ben stated, his gaze meeting mine. "Near Crater Lake, an old, dormant nexus. Something has stirred it." Crater Lake, another wilderness area. My stomach clenched, but this time I wouldn't be alone. "What's the target?" I asked, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "Not a target," Thorne corrected. "It's an escalation. a more powerful manifestation. We believe the void walker that marked you in the Gifford pinchot is behind it. It's consolidating its power, and we think it might be searching for something else, something connected to the larger convergence it spoke of. Sergeant Vance, I whispered, holding up the dog tag which I now wore constantly, hidden beneath my shirt. Thorne nodded grimly. Perhaps, or something more. We believe Vance was working on a way to permanently seal the nexus in the Gifford pinchot using some form of counter-resonance. A way to fight fire with fire, or rather, void with void. He had a theory about tapping into the very energies these entities use and turning them against themselves. If the Void Walker senses a lingering echo of that, it might be trying to retrieve it or prevent its completion. "So what's the plan?" I asked, my fear warring with a strange sense of purpose. This was it, my first real mission. "We're sending a containment unit to Crater Lake," Ben said. "You're coming with us, this time not as collateral. As part of the team, you'll be the bait and the focus." I gulped the bait. "Your resonance," Thorne affirmed. "It's a unique signature. We'll use it to lure the entity into a controlled environment where we can deploy a more potent anchor disruptor. We have a new prototype developed using some of Vance's old research. We think it might be capable of a permanent sealing rather than just a temporary repulsion." "But if it's attracted to me, won't that put me in even more danger?" I asked, a tremor in my voice. "Yes," Thorne said, his expression unwavering. "Immense danger. It will be drawn to you like a moth to a flame, but we'll be there to protect you, and you'll have a role to play. We'll equip you with a specialized psychic amplifier designed to focus your resonance. It'll be uncomfortable, possibly painful, but it could be the key to disrupting its manifestation." He pulled out a small, intricate device, a metallic gauntlet with glowing blue conduits and a central crystal. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie. "This will amplify your inherent spark, allowing us to pinpoint its manifestation and give us a window to strike its anchor." I looked at the gauntlet, then at the dog tag in my hand. Sergeant Vance had been here before. He had fought this fight, and he had lost. But his legacy, his research, might be the key to winning. "What if it tries to absorb me again?" I asked, the memory of that crushing void making my breath hitch. "We won't let it," Ben said, his hand resting on the stock of his energy rifle. "That's our job, but you'll need to be strong, mentally. If you falter, if your fear takes hold, it will be an open invitation." I took a deep breath. This was terrifying, but it was also a chance. A chance to fight back, to avenge the countless lost souls, to perhaps even find some measure of peace for my own haunted mind. My life had been stolen by this thing, and now I had a chance to reclaim it. "When do we leave?" I asked, my voice resolute. Thorne and Ben exchanged a look, a shared understanding passing between them. "Tonight," Thorne said, a grim determination in his eyes. "We don't have much time." The journey to Crater Lake was long and silent, the van's hum a constant companion. As we drove deeper into the wilderness, away from the city lights, the familiar sense of unease began to creep back in. But this time, it was different. It was tempered by purpose, by the knowledge that I wasn't alone, that I was part of something larger. We arrived at a remote trailhead on the eastern side of Crater Lake National Park long after midnight. The air was cold and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Above us, the sky was a canvas of countless stars, brilliant and indifferent. The lake itself was a vast, dark expanse, a silent, ancient mirror reflecting the cosmos. It was beautiful in a stark, breathtaking way, and beneath its serene surface, I knew, lurked an ancient dread. Our team consisted of Ben, Thorn, and two other agents. A quiet woman named Anya, an expert in environmental resonance, and a burly, stoic man named Marcus, heavily armed like Ben. Anya immediately set up a perimeter of strange, glowing sensors around our approach path, while Marcus scanned the surrounding forest with a thermal imager. The nexus is deep within the caldera, Thorn explained, pointing at a topographical map on a tablet. Likely an ancient hydrothermal vent augmented by tectonic activity. It's been dormant for centuries, but recent seismic tremors seem to have agitated it, and your Void Walker has found it. My gaze was drawn to the dark, imposing silhouette of Mount Mazama, the ancient volcano that held Crater Lake in its collapsed caldera. It felt like another Gifford Pinchot, a place of immense natural power, ripe for otherworldly intrusions. We'll approach from the east rim, descend the old Watchman Peak Trail, Ben outlined, his voice low and professional. It's steep, but it offers the most direct route to the primary manifestation zone. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just another hike. This was a descent into hell. Thorn handed me the psychic amplifier gauntlet. It was cool and smooth against my skin, fitting snugly over my forearm. Remember your training, focus your intent, feel its pull, but do not surrender to it. We need it to manifest strongly, but you must maintain control. I nodded, strapping the gauntlet tightly. It felt like a part of me, alien yet strangely empowering. We began our descent, moving silently through the dense forest. The moonlight, filtered through the thick canopy, cast eerie shadows that danced and twisted around us. Anya's sensors chirped softly, guiding our path, their small lights blinking in the darkness. Marcus, with his thermal imager, was our eyes in the dark, spotting unseen obstacles and potential threats. As we neared the rim of the caldera, the air grew colder, the silence deeper. It wasn't the natural silence of the forest anymore. It was that oppressive, suffocating quiet that preceded the entity. My stomach churned. The hum. I felt its faint vibration through the earth, a prelude to the terror. The gauntlet on my arm began to hum softly, a low, resonant thrum that resonated with the burgeoning presence of the Void Walker. The central crystal pulsed with a faint blue light, mirroring my own escalating psychic energy. "It's here," Anya whispered, her voice tight, pointing to her handheld scanner. "Strong readings, multiple points of entry." "Multiple?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's learned," Thorn stated, his face grim in the low light. "It's trying to manifest in several locations simultaneously to overwhelm us. Clever, but it also dilutes its power." We reached the edge of the caldera. Below us, the vast, inky blackness of Crater Lake stretched out, a silent abyss. Wizard Island, a small volcanic cone, rose like a dark sentinel from its surface. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something metallic and acrid. The cold was bone deep now, a pervasive chill that burned my skin. The hum intensified, vibrating through my entire body, making my teeth ache. The gauntlet on my arm flared, its blue light pulsing rapidly, almost painfully. The air above the lake began to shimmer, not in one place, but in several, like patches of heat haze rising from the impossibly cold surface. "There it is," Ben muttered, raising his energy rifle. "Looks like a full manifestation. It's bringing everything it has." From the shimmering distortions, several dark shapes began to coalesce. Not just one, but three. Three impossibly tall, slender columns of pure, light-absorbing darkness rising from the surface of the lake, absorbing the faint moonlight, the very stars above them. They were like monstrous, silent sentinels poised to strike. My heart pounded a frantic drum against my ribs, three of them, each one radiating that immense, crushing presence, that soul-destroying despair. The original encounter had almost broken me. Three felt like an insurmountable terror. Their projections, Thorn yelled over the growing hum, his voice strained. Echoes, the true anchor, the true manifestation is still likely somewhere hidden, but these are potent enough to kill us. A protagonist focus, Thorn commanded, grabbing my shoulder. Channel your resonance. We need to draw its true presence, its anchor, into the open. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to push back against the despair, against the overwhelming fear. I focused on the dog tag clutched in my other hand. Sergeant Vance, his memory, his sacrifice, his defiance. I channeled my anger, my desperate need to fight back into the gauntlet. The crystal on my arm flared, emitting a piercing, high-pitched whine that cut through the Void Walker's hum. A wave of blue energy surged from the gauntlet, radiating outwards across the lake towards the three dark entities. It was like an invisible sonar pulse, probing, seeking. The Void Walkers reacted instantly. Their forms rippled and distorted, and the hum emanating from them intensified, becoming a furious, deafening roar. They turned their faceless gaze towards me, a collective, cold intelligence probing my mind. You persist, you dare, your spark will be extinguished. Completely. The thought echoed in my mind, multiplied by three, a symphony of ancient rage and cold promise. It's working, Anya yelled. It's working, Anya yelled, her voice a desperate, thin thread against the escalating roar of the Void Walker's hum. The gauntlet on my arm was a furnace, burning with a cold fire, the blue light throbbing with every beat of my heart. The sound it emitted, that high-pitched whine, seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air, creating a shimmering distortion around me. I felt like a tuning fork struck by a cosmic hammer, vibrating uncontrollably. The three dark columns above the lake pulsed with an unholy light, a negative luminescence that seemed to suck the illumination from the stars. They began to converge, not physically, but spiritually, their individual presences merging into one colossal, crushing wave of despair. The psychic assault intensified, 1,000 silent screams echoing in my mind, each one a fresh torrent of agony and regret. Surrender, embrace the silence, become one with the void. The words weren't spoken, but imprinted directly onto my consciousness, laced with an ancient, irresistible allure. My knees buckled, my vision swam. The edge of the caldera seemed to tilt, threatening to send me plummeting into the abyss. Fight it, protagonist, fight the pull. Thorn's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the mental static. He gripped my shoulder, his fingers digging into my flesh, grounding me. Ben was already firing, incandescent bolts of energy lancing across the dark expanse of the lake, striking the coalescing projections. The bolts seemed to pass through them, distorting their forms momentarily, but the Void Walkers held firm, their focus unwavering on me. Marcus added suppressing fire, a rhythmic thump-thump-thump from his specialized rifle, sending bursts of light into the dark shapes. Anya, meanwhile, was frantically adjusting her sensors, a bead of sweat tracing a path down her temple. I gasped, a strangled cry escaping my throat. The gauntlet shrieked. My own resonance, amplified to a terrifying degree, was like a magnet, pulling the Void Walker's attention, drawing its immense power directly into my consciousness. I felt an invisible tendril reaching, probing, seeking a weakness, a crack in my resolve. It wanted to finish the absorption it had started months ago, to consume me whole, and this time there would be no escape. You cannot resist, you are already ours. You are a whisper soon to be silenced. The force of the thought was immense, a psychological blow that rattled my very being. My mental shields, painstakingly built over months of training, flickered, threatening to collapse. I could feel the Void Walker's hunger, its ancient, insatiable craving for sentience, for experience, for life. It wasn't hatred or malice in a human sense, just a profound, cosmic emptiness seeking to be filled, and I was the chosen vessel. But then, a surge of defiance, born from months of nightmares and fear, flared within me. Sergeant Vance. His dog tag, clutched in my free hand, felt like a burning ember. I focused on it, on his name, on his sacrifice. He had faced this, and he had fought. I would too. I would not surrender. I would not be silenced. I pushed back, pouring all my will, all my anger, all my terror into the gauntlet. The blue light intensified, burning brighter than ever, and the piercing whine became a sustained shriek. My body convulsed, a wave of pure energy ripping through me. I felt like I was tearing myself apart, but in doing so, I was also tearing at the Void Walker's grasp. The three dark projections recoiled, their forms flickering violently, the collective hum faltering into a series of discordant wails. They were agitated, confused. My amplified resonance was too strong, too raw, too unexpected. It was not just bait, it was a weapon. "It's manifesting, northeast quadrant below Watchman Peak," Anya screamed, pointing with a trembling hand towards a specific point on the lake's surface, closer to the caldera wall. A new energy signature, much stronger, the anchor. Thorne's eyes gleamed with a grim satisfaction. "That's it, protagonist, you did it, you drew it out." He turned to Ben and Marcus. "Fire on the new signature. Anya, give me coordinates for the disruptor." A new shimmering began, not a projection this time, but a deeper, more profound distortion, a tear in reality itself. It pulsed with a sickening black light, a swirling vortex of nothingness just above the water. Within it, I could sense the true heart of the Void Walker, a vast, hungry presence, an ancient malevolence that made the projections feel like mere shadows. This was the entity, fully tethered, fully manifest. This was the anchor. My gauntlet flared again, the blue light now a blinding beacon. The entity's focus, its crushing mental presence, shifted entirely from me to this new point. It was confused, angry. Its carefully orchestrated incursion was being disrupted, its power siphoned, its true location revealed. Interference unacceptable, the thought screamed in my mind, no longer laced with despair, but with raw, unadulterated fury. Ben and Marcus immediately retargeted, their energy rifles spitting bolts of incandescent light towards the swirling vortex. The bolts struck the distortion, and this time they didn't pass through. They seemed to hit an invisible barrier, causing ripples to spread across the shimmering void like stones dropped into dark water. A soundless shriek ripped through my mind, far more potent than any I had heard before, a scream of pure elemental agony. "It's working, it's hitting the anchor directly," Thorne yelled, adjusting a complex device on his wrist, a cylindrical object with intricate glowing lines. "Keep it distracted, Anya now." Anya, her face pale but determined, tapped a sequence on her console. A low whirring sound emanated from a backpack she carried, then a soft thump. A small metallic drone, no larger than a bird, launched silently from her position, streaking across the dark expanse of the lake directly towards the swirling black vortex. It was barely visible against the night sky, a fleeting silhouette against the distant stars. The Void Walker, still reeling from the energy blasts, sensed the drone's approach. One of the larger projections, a towering column of darkness, detached from the others, arcing across the lake towards the drone with impossible speed. It was going to intercept it. "Marcus, suppressing fire, keep that thing off the drone," Ben roared, continuing his own volley. Marcus unleashed a torrent of fire, bright tracer rounds arcing towards the attacking projection. The rounds didn't harm it, but they seemed to disrupt its concentration, flickering its form, buying precious seconds. The drone, meanwhile, zipped closer, a tiny, determined spark against the cosmic horror. My gauntlet continued to burn, my resonance still drawing the Void Walker's furious attention, keeping its true manifestation pinned, momentarily unable to fully defend itself. It was a terrifying dance, a high-stakes gamble with my sanity and my life. I was a lightning rod, and the storm was raging all around me. The drone reached the vortex. Just as the projection lunged, a burst of blinding white light erupted from the drone, followed by a deafening crack that echoed across the lake, far louder than any thunder. The light was so intense it momentarily bleached the color from the world, searing itself onto my retinas. The vortex shrieked again, a mental sound that felt like my skull was splitting. The light seemed to consume the darkness, pushing back the shimmering void. The very air vibrated, oscillating wildly. The drone, its mission accomplished, crumpled and fell into the lake, a smoking ruin. "It hit," Thorn roared, his face etched with triumph. "The anchor disruptor is active, it's collapsing." The white light from the vortex began to intensify, forming a sphere of pure, searing energy. The three dark projections above the lake writhed in agony, their forms shrinking, flickering like dying embers. The crushing despair they radiated was replaced by a palpable, frantic terror. They were being torn apart, ripped back into the dimension from whence they came. "No, you will not consume our essence," the thought, fragmented and desperate, tore through my mind, a dying gasp from a cosmic predator. The sphere of light pulsed one last time, an almost blinding supernova of pure energy, then imploded inwards with a deafening THWOOM. The air shimmered violently, then suddenly cleared. The hum vanished. The bone-deep cold receded. The dark projections were gone. The vortex was gone. The lake, vast and serene, reflected the indifferent stars once more. Silence. Not the oppressive, suffocating silence of the Void Walker, but the profound, natural silence of the wilderness at night. The wind rustled through the pines. A distant owl hooted. It was over. I collapsed, my legs giving out beneath me. The gauntlet on my arm stopped its painful humming, the blue crystal fading to a dull glow. My body ached, my head throbbed, and my mind felt like a raw, exposed nerve. But I was alive, and the Void Walker was gone. Thorn, Ben, Marcus, and Anya rushed to my side. Thorn immediately began scanning me with his handheld device, his brow furrowed with concern. "The psychic residue levels are off the charts, but stabilizing," Thorn muttered, more to himself. "Remarkable. No lasting neural damage, at least not yet. How do you feel, protagonist?" I managed a weak, shaky laugh. Like I just stared into the abyss and it stared back and then exploded. Ben clapped me on the back, a rare smile gracing his grim face. "You did good, kid, better than good, you're a natural." Anya knelt beside me, her eyes filled with a new respect. "Your resonance, it was incredible. You held it. You truly held it. That's why it worked." Marcus simply nodded, his stoic expression softening. Impressive. I looked out at the tranquil, silent lake, still trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. We had done it. We had fought an interdimensional entity and won, or at least driven it back. Is it gone for good? I asked, the hope in my voice fragile. Thorn sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Permanently sealed this particular nexus, yes. The disruptor uses a resonance cascade based on Vance's research. It creates a localized dimensional barrier, an impermeable membrane, effectively severing the anchor's connection to its dimension. The Void Walker, or at least that manifestation of it, can no longer cross over here. But the entity itself, the one that marked me, I pressed, the lingering dread still a cold knot in my stomach. Thorn's smile faded. The entity exists in its own dimension. We didn't destroy it. We merely cut off its access point here. It will retreat, regroup, but it still knows you, it still remembers you, and it still wants you. And there are other nexus points, protagonist, many other nexus points. My brief moment of triumph evaporated. This wasn't the end. It was just a battle won in a war that stretched across dimensions and time. The chilling words of Watcher 7 echoed in my mind, "It will seek you out." So I'm still a target, I stated, the realization heavy. You are, Ben confirmed, his voice grave. But now you're also a weapon, and you're on our side. We'll teach you how to use that resonance, how to control it, how to turn it against them. The Void Walkers are drawn to you, yes, but you can also draw them to us, and we'll be ready. Thorn helped me to my feet. My body protested, every muscle screaming, but I found a new strength, a new resolve. I looked at the gauntlet on my arm, its crystal now a dormant blue. This device, this connection to the impossible, was now a part of me. What's next? I asked, my voice firmer than before. Thorn gazed out at the lake, his eyes distant, seeing more than just the water and the stars. Next, protagonist, we pack up, and then we begin the real work. Crater Lake was merely a skirmish. There's a larger pattern at play. A growing number of incursions, a subtle shift in the veil itself. We believe something is accelerating the process. Something or someone is actively trying to thin the veil. My mind immediately jumped to the entity's words in the Gifford Pinchot, "This place is sacred." A silence that consumes all things, the hunger, the absorption. And its final, desperate thought tonight, "You will not consume our essence." It spoke of sacred places, I mused aloud, and consuming essence. What if there's a larger design, a purpose beyond just feeding? Thorn turned to me, his expression intrigued. You felt a deeper purpose in its thoughts. I nodded slowly. It felt like a pilgrimage, like it was trying to achieve something, not just survive, like it was building towards something. And when we hit the anchor tonight, it felt like we were disrupting a critical step in that process. Anya chimed in, consulting her scanner. The energy signatures we detected from the anchor tonight were unusual. More complex than previous Void Walker incursions. There was a secondary resonance, almost like a harmonic, as if the entity was trying to resonate with something else beyond just manifesting. Thorn's eyes widened slightly. A harmonic. Vance's research spoke of such a thing, a grand convergence. A single, powerful anchor point that could potentially bridge multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing for a mass incursion. He believed the Gifford Pinchot was just one piece of a much larger, ancient puzzle, a system of nexus points, all designed to channel power to a central, primary anchor. My blood ran cold. You means more of them. No, Thorn corrected, his voice grave. Not more of them, more of it. A single, massive entity manifesting across multiple nexus points, drawing power from each to create a single, overwhelming incursion. A true planetary absorption. Vance called it the Great Silence. The Great Silence. The phrase was a physical blow, echoing the entity's chilling promise, a silence that consumes all things. Sergeant Vance believed the Void Walker in Gifford Pinchot was attempting to activate one such primary nexus, Thorn continued, pacing agitatedly. He thought it was merely gathering energy, preparing, but if it's escalating, if it's actively trying to create this great silence, then we're facing something far more dangerous than just localized incursions. "And the dog tag?" I asked, holding it up, the tarnished metal suddenly feeling much heavier. Did Vance have a plan to stop the Great Silence? "He did," Thorn said, his voice softer, almost reverent. He theorized that if the nexus points were designed to channel power to a primary anchor, they could also be used to channel a counter-resonance from a primary nexus, effectively creating a feedback loop that would collapse the entire system. But he needed a specific kind of catalyst, a living conduit with a unique resonance capable of anchoring the counterfrequency. Thorn looked at me, his gaze intense. "Someone like you, protagonist, someone who survived full exposure, someone who resonates powerfully with the void. You are the key. You always were. That's why the entity has been hunting you. Not just to finish the absorption, but to prevent you from becoming what you are." The weight of his words settled on me, a monumental burden. I wasn't just a recruit anymore, I was a catalyst, a weapon, a living counter to a cosmic threat. My ordinary life was not just over, it was irrelevant. My purpose had been redefined by something ancient and terrifying. "What about Vance's research?" I asked, desperate for anything tangible, anything that could help me understand this impossible role. "Is there more? Something he found about the primary nexus, about how to stop it?" "We've been working to reconstruct it for decades," Thorn admitted, a flicker of frustration in his eyes. "After his disappearance, the Gifford Pinchot nexus was quiet for a long time. We thought he had succeeded in sealing it, perhaps at the cost of his own life. But the information was scattered, coded, hidden. He knew how dangerous it was. He didn't want it to fall into the wrong hands. We have fragments, theories, but no complete picture. Until now." He gestured to the spot where the anchor disruptor had imploded. "Tonight, your unique resonance, combined with the disruptor's activation, created a unique energy signature. Anya, plot the trajectory of that energy wave. Analyze its dispersion pattern. See if it triangulates with any known latent nexus points." Anya, already back at her console, began typing furiously, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. Moments later, a complex web of lines and coordinates appeared on the screen, overlaying the topographical map. A faint green dot pulsed in the center of the web, thousands of miles away. "There!" Anya exclaimed, her voice filled with a mix of awe and dread. "A powerful, previously undetected energy signature. It's a perfect convergence point. All known nexus points appear to be feeding into it, dormant or active. And its energy signature matches Vance's projected primary nexus almost exactly." Thorn peered at the screen, his face grim. "Where is it?" Anya zoomed in, the map shifting, continents scrolling into view. The green dot solidified, marking a precise location. "The Gobi Desert," Anya whispered, her voice barely audible. "Deep within the Gobi Desert." The Gobi Desert, a vast, desolate, and ancient place far removed from the damp forests of the Pacific Northwest or the clear waters of Crater Lake, a place of extremes of forgotten histories, and now the focal point of an interdimensional war. Thorne straightened, his shoulders squaring. All right, team, new priority. The Great Silence is awakening. We need to get to the Gobi, and we need to find Vance's full research. There must be something more, something he left behind, a final piece of the puzzle, a blueprint for the catalyst. He looked at me, his gaze unwavering. Protagonist, you're coming with us. This is where your journey truly begins. I looked out at the silent lake, then up at the indifferent stars. The Gobi Desert. The thought was daunting, terrifying, yet also thrilling. My life had taken a turn into the truly impossible, and there was no going back. As the first faint streaks of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, casting long, purple shadows across the caldera, we began to pack up our gear. The wind picked up, a cold whisper through the pines. My mind raced, grappling with the enormity of the task ahead, the Great Silence, a planet-wide absorption. It was almost too vast, too terrifying to comprehend. But I wasn't alone. I had Ben, Thorne, Anya, Marcus, and I had the dog tag, a tangible link to a man who had faced this threat before, who had perhaps even foreseen my role. As we ascended the trail, leaving Crater Lake behind, I felt a new sense of purpose harden within me. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was a cold fire fueling my resolve. I was no longer a victim. I was a protector of the veil, and I would not let the Great Silence consume my world. The journey from Crater Lake was a blur of driving, flying, and intense briefings. The urgency in Thorne's voice was palpable, a constant reminder of the stakes. We left the United States on a discreet cargo plane, flying under the radar, crossing oceans and continents in a whirlwind of logistics and planning. My old life as a civilian was not just over, it was a distant, almost forgotten dream. I was fully immersed in this hidden war, a ghost moving through the world, unseen by the masses. During the long flight, Thorne and Anya delved deeper into Vance's fragmented research, now bolstered by the new data from Crater Lake. They projected holographic maps, complex mathematical equations, and cryptic handwritten notes from Vance's journals, painstakingly salvaged and digitized over the years. I watched, fascinated and bewildered, as they tried to piece together the puzzle of the Great Silence. Vance believed the Void Walkers weren't simply random incursions, Thorne explained, gesturing at a shimmering 3D model of the Earth crisscrossed with energy lines. He thought they were scouts or perhaps parts of a collective consciousness preparing for a single unified harvest, and the nexus points were the harvesting equipment. He described the primary nexus in the Gobi as a grand confluence, Anya added, her finger tracing a glowing line that converged on the Gobi Desert, a place where multiple dimensional planes intersect, naturally forming a gateway of immense power. It's been dormant for millennia, but he theorized it could be activated by a sufficient buildup of resonant energy from secondary nexus points, like the one in Gifford Pinchot or Crater Lake. My gauntlet, which I now wore constantly, hummed softly in response to the mention of resonant energy. My connection to it, to them, was growing. I could feel the faint echoes of the Void Walker's presence, like distant static on a radio, wherever Thorne pointed on the map as a potential nexus. So the Void Walker that marked me wasn't just feeding, I mused, the pieces slowly falling into place. It was actively working towards this grand confluence, building up the energy. Thorne nodded grimly. Precisely. And your resonance, your spark, as we call it, is uniquely attuned to these energies. Vance believed such individuals, those with a powerful inherent resonance, could serve as either a primary conduit for the Void Walker's expansion, or, if properly trained and equipped, as a counter-conduit to collapse the system. He then showed me a drawing from Vance's journal. It depicted a figure, shrouded in shadow, with lines of energy radiating from their outstretched hands, disrupting a swirling vortex of darkness. It was crudely drawn, but undeniably powerful, and the figure's arm bore a distinctive gauntlet, identical to the one I now wore. Vance was working on this amplifier, this gauntlet, to channel his own resonance, Thorne explained, a hint of awe in his voice. But he never perfected it. He disappeared before he could fully test his theories. He understood the potential, both for destruction and for salvation. He left cryptic notes about harmonic frequencies and entropic feedback loops. But the key piece of information, the precise frequency needed to create the counter-resonance, was lost with him. "Roar, it's still out there," Anya interjected, looking at the dog tag I wore. His dog tag is still highly saturated with his psychic imprint. It survived the nexus point. What if it's more than just a memento? What if it's a data storage device, a psychic key? Thorne's eyes lit up. "Anya, that's brilliant. The materials in military-issue dog tags from that era were simple, but in certain conditions, high psychic residue could imprint on them, creating a sort of resonant memory. If Vance was working on such advanced theories, it's not inconceivable he could have imprinted the critical data onto his own tag, knowing its resilient nature." He reached for the dog tag, but I instinctively pulled back. It was a reflex, a deeply ingrained habit. This tag, this cold piece of metal, was my anchor to the impossible, my proof, my burden. "Sorry," I mumbled, feeling foolish. It's always been with me." "Of course," Thorne said, understanding. "But if we could analyze its resonance, its subtle energetic fluctuations, we might be able to extract the information. It would be difficult, dangerous even, to tap into such a potent psychic imprint without a conduit. But with your resonance, you might be able to act as a bridge." The idea of willingly connecting myself to the dog tag's unknown contents, to Vance's potentially horrifying final moments, was terrifying. But the alternative, the great silence, was far worse. "How do we do it?" I asked, my voice steady. Thorne pulled out another piece of equipment from a secure compartment. A small, intricately carved wooden box inlaid with silver symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim cabin light. It was ancient, clearly not of modern design. "This is an etheric resonator," he explained, placing it carefully on a small table. "An antique passed down through generations of protectors. It amplifies and focuses psychic energies. We'll use it to create a link between you, the gauntlet, and the dog tag. It won't be pleasant. You'll be tapping into Vance's final moments, his knowledge, his terror. But it might be the only way to get the information we need before we reach the Gobi." Ben, who had been listening in silence, placed a hand on my shoulder. "We won't force you, kid. This is a choice. But if you can get us that frequency, we might just have a chance at stopping this thing for good." I looked at the ancient box, then at the gauntlet on my arm, and finally at the dog tag in my hand. It was an impossible burden, but also an undeniable call to action. My life had been irrevocably altered, and now, it seemed, I was the linchpin in a cosmic battle. "Let's do it," I said, my voice resolute. "When do we start?" Thorne nodded, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Now we don't have much time." The ritual, for that was what it felt like, began in the hushed cabin of the cargo plane. Thorn meticulously arranged the etheric resonator, placing the dog tag within a small, crystal-lined indentation in the center of the wooden box. Anya prepared a series of monitoring devices, their screens displaying complex waveforms and energy patterns. Ben and Marcus stood guard, their faces unreadable, ready for any unforeseen complications. Place your hand with the gauntlet activated over the dog tag, Thorn instructed, his voice low and calm. Focus your intent, feel the connection, allow your resonance to bridge the gap between yourself and Vance's imprint. Do not fight the incoming sensations, no matter how disturbing. Let them flow through you. We need clarity, not resistance. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I activated the gauntlet. The blue crystal pulsed, and a faint hum emanated from it, echoing the resonator's soft thrum. I slowly lowered my hand, the gauntlet settling over the dog tag. As my amplified resonance connected with the ancient, imprinted metal, a jolt of raw energy shot through my arm, vibrating up to my very core. My vision blurred, the cabin of the plane dissolved, replaced by a swirling vortex of images and sensations. The cold, damp air of the Gifford Pinchat, the stench of decay, the crushing presence of the Void Walker magnified 100-fold, and a mind, not my own but a different consciousness, older, more hardened, filled with a desperate, unwavering resolve. Sergeant Thomas E. Vance. I was immersed in his memories, his perceptions. I saw through his eyes, felt through his senses. The terror was overwhelming, yet beneath it, a burning determination. Vance was alone, deep in the tunnel, facing the same impossible entity I had encountered. But he wasn't running, he was fighting. I felt the incredible strain, the agony of his psychic connection to the Void Walker, far deeper and more intimate than my own brief encounter. He wasn't just observing it, he was probing it, trying to understand its nature, its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities. He was a pioneer, a mad scientist of the impossible, using his own mind as a laboratory. The images flashed faster, a maelstrom of information. Mathematical equations, alien geometries, swirling energy patterns, all overlaid with a profound, aching sense of loss and sacrifice. Vance was trying to find a frequency, a specific harmonic that could destabilize the Void Walker's anchor, not just repel it, but dismantle it from the inside out. He was trying to create the counter-resonance Thorn spoke of. Then a sudden, blinding flash, not a memory, but a sudden influx of pure data directly into my consciousness. A sequence of numbers, symbols, and intricate energy schematics. It was the harmonic frequency. The key, the counter-resonance, it wasn't just theoretical, it was a tangible, usable weapon. But then the vision darkened. The Void Walker, enraged, turned its full attention on Vance. The crushing despair, the chilling hum, intensified to an unbearable degree. Vance's mental shields, battered and bleeding, began to crumble. He had gone too deep, pushed too far. He had the information, but he was trapped. I felt his final moments. The searing pain, the absolute terror, the chilling cold of absorption. His consciousness unraveling, his memories consumed, his very essence becoming part of the great silence. It was an agony beyond imagining, a descent into oblivion. I felt the last flicker of his will, his desperate hope that someone someday would find his message, would continue his fight. And then, just as the darkness threatened to consume me too, a powerful surge of energy, a brilliant blue light, erupted from the gauntlet on my arm. My own resonance, my own innate spark, surged forward, pushing back against the encroaching void. I was a conduit, yes, but I was also myself. I was not Vance. I would not be absorbed. The etheric resonator glowed with an otherworldly light, its silver symbols pulsing in sync with the gauntlet. Thorn was shouting something, his voice distant, strained. Anya's monitors were flashing wildly. I clung to Vance's final message, the complex frequency searing itself into my mind, embedding itself into my very soul. It was a lifeline, a reason to fight, a promise. With a final agonizing wrench, I tore myself free from the memories, from the absorption. The darkness receded. The cabin of the plane snapped back into focus. I gasped, my body racked with tremors, cold sweat plastering my hair to my forehead. The gauntlet faded, the etheric resonators glow dimmed. The dog tag, still nestled in its crystal bed, was now inert, its psychic imprint seemingly exhausted. Thorn rushed to my side, scanning me frantically. "Protagonist, are you all right? What did you see? Did you get anything?" I slowly opened my eyes, my vision still blurred, my mind reeling from the psychic ordeal. But the information was there, clear and undeniable. The frequency, the counter-resonance. I have it," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Vance's frequency, the key to the great silence." A wave of relief washed over Thorn's face, quickly followed by a grim determination. "Excellent." Anya immediately began analyzing the patterns in Protagonist's neural pathways. Cross-reference with our existing data on Vance's theories. We need to verify and replicate this frequency. Anya, her face pale, nodded, already moving to her console. Ben and Marcus, looking relieved, exchanged a look. "That was intense, kid," Ben said, his voice laced with concern. "You okay?" I nodded, though my body felt like it had been run over by a truck. The lingering echoes of Vance's absorption, his final terror, were still rattling in my mind. But so was his defiant will, his ultimate sacrifice for humanity. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a shaky smile. "Just got a lot of new memories and a lot of purpose." Thorn looked at me, a profound respect in his eyes. "You did more than fine, Protagonist. You just saved humanity, or at least gave us a fighting chance. Sergeant Vance would be proud." The rest of the flight was dedicated to processing the data I had acquired. Anya, with Thorn's guidance, worked tirelessly, cross-referencing the psychic imprint I had received with Vance's fragmented notes. The frequency I had experienced wasn't a simple set of numbers. It was a complex, multi-layered waveform, a specific harmonic resonance designed to disrupt the very fabric of the Void Walker's existence within our dimension. It was elegant, terrifying, and utterly brilliant. "It's incredible," Anya whispered, her eyes wide as she projected the verified waveform on a holographic display. "It's like an inverse of their own resonant frequency. It won't just repel them, it will unravel them from within. It's a complete system collapse, not just for the individual entity, but for the entire Nexus network, if applied at the Grand Confluence." "Vance was a genius," Thorn murmured, tracing the complex lines of the waveform. "He understood them better than anyone. This is it. This is the blueprint for the permanent solution, but applying it, that's the real challenge." "How do we do it?" I asked, my gaze fixed on the glowing waveform. It felt strangely familiar now, almost a part of my own resonance. "We need to build a larger-scale disruptor," Thorn explained. "One capable of projecting this frequency across the entire Grand Confluence. It will require immense power and a precise calibration. But most importantly, it will require a conduit, someone with the unique resonance to initiate and sustain the harmonic." He looked at me. We need to build a larger scale disruptor, Thorn explained. One capable of projecting this frequency across the entire Grand Confluence. It will require immense power and a precise calibration. But most importantly, it will require a conduit, someone with the unique resonance to initiate and sustain the harmonic. He looked at me, the weight of his words settled in my gut, cold and heavy. I was the key, not just a weapon, but the linchpin, the essential component without which Vance's brilliant, terrifying plan was useless. My life, my very existence, had become intrinsically tied to the fate of the world. It was an overwhelming burden, but also a stark, undeniable purpose. Me, I stated, my voice barely a whisper, though it felt like a roar in my own ears. Thorn nodded, his expression unyielding. Yes, protagonist, only you. Your journey through the void, your survival, your unique spark, it has left you with a resonance unlike anyone else. You are both a beacon and a shield, a living bridge between dimensions. Vance theorized that only someone who had truly tasted the void yet retained their humanity could wield such a power. He was preparing himself, but you are a natural. The plain cabin, still filled with the lingering scent of ozone and the hum of monitors, suddenly felt too small, too claustrophobic. Outside, the vast, empty expanse of sky stretched on, indifferent to the impossible stakes we were discussing. How exactly does this work? I asked, trying to grasp the practicalities of becoming a living, interdimensional energy conduit. What does initiating and sustaining the harmonic even mean? Anya stepped forward, projecting a new holographic image. It showed the Gobi Desert, centered on the newly identified Grand Confluence, now a pulsing green dot on the map. Surrounding it were countless smaller lines, all converging, representing the various nexus points. Imagine the Voidwalkers' network as a massive interdimensional pipeline. Anya began, her voice crisp and clear, despite the weariness in her eyes. The secondary nexus points like Gifford Pinchot and Crater Lake are feeder pipes, siphoning energy into the main conduit, the Grand Confluence. This energy is what allows the Voidwalker to fully manifest, to begin the Great Silence absorption process on a planetary scale. She then overlaid the image with a shimmering blue waveform, Vance's frequency. What Sergeant Vance discovered is a counterfrequency, a harmonic dissonance. When introduced into the Grand Confluence, this frequency won't just disrupt the flow, it will reverse it. It will create an entropic feedback loop, causing the entire network to collapse in on itself, effectively sealing every nexus point simultaneously and permanently. "And I'm the plug in that loop?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood, but the words came out sounding strained. Thorn gave a faint, grim smile. "More like the fuse, the initial spark. The disruptor we're building will be massive, capable of generating immense power, but it's a machine. It needs a catalyst, a living mind to finely tune and sustain that specific harmonic resonance to make it truly resonate with the void. It needs your consciousness to translate the raw energy into Vance's frequency. Your unique signature is the key to activating the cascade effect." "So I become a giant psychic antenna," I murmured, looking at the gauntlet on my arm, then back at the glowing map of the Gobi. "A very precise, very powerful antenna," Ben interjected, his voice surprisingly gentle. "And you won't be alone, kid. We'll be right there with you, protecting you, feeding power to the disruptor. Thorn and Anya will be running the machine, Marcus and I will be covering the perimeter. We're a team." His words, simple and direct, helped ground me. It was still terrifying, but at least I wasn't facing this impossible task entirely on my own. "What are the risks?" I asked, bracing myself. Thorn's face darkened. "Immense. The grand confluence will be the most concentrated nexus of void energy on Earth. The entity itself will likely be fully manifest there, more powerful than anything you've encountered. It will try to absorb you, to silence your resonance, to prevent the feedback loop. The mental strain will be beyond anything you've experienced. There's a very real chance your mind could break, or that you could be absorbed completely, becoming a part of the great silence yourself. He paused, letting the grim reality sink in. And even if you succeed, initiating the feedback loop will cause a massive psychic backlash, a ripple effect across the entire network. You'll be at the epicenter. There's no telling what the long-term effects on your mind, on your very being might be. Vance never got to fully test this part of his theory. You'll be charting unknown territory. The image of Vance's final, agonizing moments flashed in my mind. The burning determination, the ultimate sacrifice. He had known the risks, he had faced them head-on. What about the disruptor itself? I pressed, trying to focus on the tangible. How long will it take to build? How do we even get it to the Gobi? We've already initiated manufacturing of the core components at a secure facility in Uzbekistan, Thorne explained. We're flying there first. It's a rush job, but the protectors have been preparing for a potential large-scale incursion for decades. We have the resources. From Uzbekistan, we'll transport the assembled disruptor via a modified ground convoy through the Gobi, under the guise of an archaeological expedition. The area is heavily restricted, but our covers are solid. An archaeological expedition, I raised an eyebrow, to stop a cosmic entity. Anya managed a small smile. The Gobi is full of ancient ruins, forgotten civilizations. It provides excellent cover for large-scale operations. Plus, some of those sites are minor nexus points themselves, lending credence to our interest. Our priority now is to get you fully prepared, Thorne continued, his tone serious once more. We need to refine your control over Vance's frequency, build your mental fortitude to withstand the backlash, and integrate you fully with the disruptor's systems. The gauntlet is good, but for the grand confluence, we'll need something more. We'll need a direct neural interface. A direct neural interface. The words conjured images of wires, invasive surgery, and a complete loss of self. My stomach clenched. Don't worry, Thorne said, as if reading my thoughts. It's non-invasive, a specialized helmet that links directly to the gauntlet and then to your brain's natural resonance centers. It will amplify your abilities exponentially, but it will also leave you incredibly vulnerable. We need to train you for that vulnerability. The rest of the flight became an intense training session. Anya rigged up holographic projections of the complex waveforms I had to generate, and I spent hours in meditative focus, trying to replicate them purely through my intent, guided by the gauntlet. Thorne put me through brutal mental exercises, simulating the Void Walker's psychic assault, pushing my mental shields to their absolute limit. Ben and Marcus, meanwhile, kept a vigilant watch, their presence a silent reminder of the physical threats that awaited us. Sleep became a luxury, snatched in short, restless bursts, filled with fragmented memories of Vance's terror and the crushing hum of the void. But with each session, I felt my control grow, my understanding deepen. Vance's frequency, once an alien concept, now resonated with something primal within me, a countersong to the cosmic silence. We arrived in Uzbekistan under the cloak of night, landing at a remote, heavily fortified facility hidden deep within a mountain range. The air was dry and cold, a stark contrast to the humid forests I was used to. Inside, the facility was a hive of activity. a subterranean labyrinth of laboratories, workshops, and secure storage areas. Other protectors, grim-faced and efficient, moved silently through the corridors, their eyes betraying the same haunted awareness I now possessed. The disruptor, or what would become the disruptor, was already taking shape in a cavernous assembly bay. It was a monstrous piece of engineering, a towering array of crystalline conduits, humming power cells, and intricate metallic scaffolding. It stood almost 3 stories high, dominating the space, radiating a subtle, almost imperceptible energy. Technicians, clad in specialized hazmat suits, swarmed around it, meticulously connecting components, calibrating systems. "This is the Resonance Cascade Emitter, or RCE," Thorne explained, leading me through the busy bay. Its core is built from an alloy infused with trace amounts of alien materials recovered from ancient Nexus sites. It allows for unparalleled energy channeling. The top section, that central spire, will house the primary amplification crystal, where your resonance will be fed in. He pointed to a platform at the very top of the spire, a small circular chamber that would be my station. It looked both exposed and terrifyingly vital. The next few days blurred into an exhausting routine of further training, equipment familiarization, and theoretical briefings. I was introduced to the neural interface helmet, a sleek silvery device that fit snugly over my head, connecting wirelessly to my gauntlet. When activated, it didn't just amplify my resonance, it streamlined it, allowing me to precisely modulate the complex waveforms of Vance's frequency with unprecedented accuracy. The sensation was intense, like having my mind directly linked to a supercomputer, but it was also exhilarating, a taste of true power. Anya meticulously calibrated the RCE to my unique psychic signature, creating a personalized interface. "Your resonance is the anchor protagonist," she explained, her fingers flying across a holographic console. "The RCE will generate the raw power, but your mind will shape it, will imbue it with the precise counter-frequency. Think of yourself as the conductor of a cosmic orchestra." Meanwhile, Ben and Marcus briefed me on security protocols, escape routes, and defensive formations. The Gobi, they stressed, would be hostile territory, not just because of the Void Walker, but potentially from human elements as well. Rogue groups, misguided cults, or even foreign governments with a nascent, incomplete understanding of the Veil could pose a threat. The Protectors operated in the shadows for a reason. "The Gobi is vast, unforgiving," Ben said, pointing at a detailed topographical map of the desert. "High winds, extreme temperatures, sandstorms will be moving through ancient landscapes, some of them untouched for millennia. Keep your eyes open. This isn't just about fighting the void, it's about surviving the environment." Finally, the RCE was fully assembled and tested. Its humming presence filled the entire bay, a palpable thrum of dormant power. It was magnificent and terrifying. "We're ready," Thorne announced, his voice echoing with anticipation. "Tomorrow we move, the grand confluence in the Gobi awaits." The convoy was discreet but formidable. A fleet of armored all-terrain vehicles, disguised as geological survey units, carried the RCE, disassembled into modular components, along with our team and a contingent of additional protectors, silent, heavily armed individuals who moved with practiced efficiency. The journey across the Gobi Desert was brutal. Days bled into nights under a sky that seemed impossibly vast, choked with more stars than I had ever seen. The landscape was alien, a panorama of endless sand dunes, jagged rock formations, and ancient, wind-sculpted canyons. The heat was relentless by day, the cold biting by night. As we drove deeper into the desert, I felt the familiar unease begin to creep in. It wasn't the bone-deep chill of the Void Walkers I had encountered before, but a subtle, pervasive hum, a dull thrum that vibrated through the very earth beneath our tires. It was faint at first, easily dismissed as the drone of the convoy, but as we approached the grand confluence, it intensified, becoming an undeniable psychic pressure. My gauntlet began to pulse faintly, the blue crystal a quiet sentinel. I felt the Void Walker's presence, not as a concentrated entity, but as a diffuse, pervasive network. It was as if the desert itself was breathing, a vast, ancient consciousness slowly awakening. "We're nearing the primary nexus," Anya announced from the lead vehicle, her voice crackling over the comms. "Energy readings are spiking across the entire region. The grand confluence is active." Thorn, seated beside me in our vehicle, tightened his grip on a specialized scanner. "It's growing stronger, faster than anticipated. It seems our disruption at Crater Lake may have accelerated its timeline, not slowed it. It's either reacting to our interference or reaching a natural critical mass." My stomach clenched. An accelerated timeline meant less preparation, more danger. We eventually arrived at our destination, a vast circular depression in the desert floor, miles wide, ringed by ancient, eroded rock formations. In the center of this natural amphitheater, half buried by millennia of sand, stood a colossal alien structure. It wasn't a monolith like the one in Gifford Pinchot, but something far more complex, more ancient. It was a spiral carved from jet-black stone, impossibly smooth and polished, rising hundreds of feet from the desert floor, twisting upwards like a petrified serpent. Its surface seemed to absorb the light, radiating a palpable cold that cut through the desert heat. This was the grand confluence, the primary nexus, the heart of the great silence. The hum was deafening here, a resonant thrum that vibrated through my entire body, rattling my teeth, churning my stomach. The air itself shimmered with a dark, almost visible energy. My gauntlet flared violently, its blue light pulsing in frantic opposition to the oppressive darkness emanating from the spiral. "That's it," Thorn breathed, his voice filled with a mix of awe and dread. "The central anchor, it's magnificent and terrifying." The convoy immediately began deployment. Protectors swarmed out of the vehicles, setting up a perimeter, establishing defensive positions. The RCE components were quickly unloaded, heavy machinery moving with practiced speed to begin assembly. This was a race against time. Ben and Marcus immediately began scanning the area, their specialized energy rifles at the ready. "No direct manifestations yet," Ben reported over the comms, his voice tight. "But the atmospheric distortions are intensifying. Something's coming." As the RCE began to rise component by component around a designated central platform near the spiral, I felt the Void Walker's full, horrifying presence. It wasn't just a physical hum now. It was a vast, ancient consciousness, a collective intelligence slowly unfurling itself within my mind. "They come, the spark, the defiance. You will be silenced, all will be silence." The thought wasn't a scream, but a deep, resonant rumble, a truth spoken from across dimensions. It was the same entity, the same hunger, but amplified to an unimaginable degree, encompassing the entire region. My mental shield strained, threatening to shatter under the immense pressure. "It knows we're here," I gasped, clutching my head. "It knows what we're trying to do." "It's reacting to your resonance, protagonist," Thorn yelled, adjusting a portable console. It's trying to disrupt you before we even begin. Fight it. Keep your focus. I forced myself to push back, channeling all my will into the gauntlet. The blue light flared, and for a moment the oppressive hum seemed to recede, replaced by a high-pitched, resonant whine, a countersong. Days turned into a feverish, agonizing blur. The RCE slowly rose, a beacon of human defiance against the encroaching darkness. Sandstorms raged, whipping up blinding curtains of dust that threatened to bury our equipment and tear apart our encampment. Through it all, the protectors worked tirelessly, driven by a silent, grim determination. I stood guard, my gauntlet burning, constantly battling the Void Walker's psychic intrusions, trying to keep its immense consciousness at bay to buy my team precious time. My mind was a battleground. Images of desolate voids, of countless absorbed souls, of an endless consuming silence assaulted me constantly. But I fought back, clinging to the memory of Vance's sacrifice, to the faces of my team, to the fragile hope of saving humanity. I practiced Vance's frequency relentlessly, carving its intricate patterns into my consciousness, ready for the moment of activation. Finally, the RCE stood tall and complete, a towering monument of crystal and metal, its central spire reaching towards the darkening sky. Its core hummed with barely contained power, its crystalline conduits glowing with an internal, ethereal light. It was magnificent. It was terrifying. "It's ready," Thorne announced over the comms, his voice strained but triumphant. "All systems online, powering up now." I climbed the access ladder to the activation platform, the wind whipping at my suit. Below, the protectors had formed a defensive perimeter, their energy weapons trained on the pulsating darkness that now emanated from the black spiral. The hum had intensified to an unbearable crescendo, a physical force that pressed down on me, threatening to crush my very bones. The sky above the grand confluence was no longer merely dark. It was a swirling vortex of black, light-absorbing clouds, impossibly deep, impossibly silent. Lightning, not of natural origin, but pure, raw energy, crackled within its depths. From the swirling darkness above the spiral, a colossal form began to coalesce. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, even compared to the previous Void Walker manifestations. It wasn't a slender column or a shimmering distortion. It was a vast, amorphous entity, a continent-sized shadow that blotted out the stars, its edges blurring into the fabric of reality itself. It pulsed with an unholy black light, its sheer mass radiating an unimaginable cold, a crushing presence that threatened to collapse the very air around it. This wasn't just a Void Walker. This was the Void Walker, the great silence fully manifest. Futility, despair, embraced the end. The thought was not spoken, but resonated directly within my mind, a universe-wide broadcast of utter hopelessness. It was accompanied by a mental image of Earth, shriveled and dark, consumed, its light extinguished. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the impending doom. The neural interface helmet, now strapped firmly to my head, felt like a vice, amplifying every terrifying sensation. The gauntlet on my arm flared, its blue light a desperate spark against the overwhelming darkness. "It's here," Ben's voice crackled over the comms, laced with raw alarm. "Full manifestation, it's drawing power directly from the grand confluence." A protagonist now, Thorne's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the mental static. "Connect, initiate Vance's frequency, we don't have much time." I stood on the activation platform, the immense power of the RCE thrumming beneath my feet, the great silence looming above me, its form still coalescing, growing larger, darker, hungrier. The black spiral in the desert floor was now pulsing with an inner light, a sickening black luminescence that mirrored the entity above. I took a deep breath, focusing every fiber of my being. I closed my eyes, not to shut out the terror, but to go inward to find the core of my resonance, the memory of Vance's sacrifice, the knowledge of his frequency. I reached out, mind connecting with gauntlet, gauntlet connecting with helmet, helmet connecting with the RCE. It was like plugging into a cosmic power plant. A surge of raw energy, vast beyond comprehension, flooded my senses. My entire being thrummed with it, a glorious, agonizing overload. Then, with all my will, I focused. I recalled Vance's frequency, its intricate, shimmering patterns, its precise harmonic. I poured my consciousness into it, shaping the raw energy, turning it into a focused, coherent wave. The blue crystal on my gauntlet flared, bathing the activation platform in an ethereal light. The RCE responded immediately. Its crystalline conduits pulsed, first with a faint blue, then growing brighter, spreading upwards through its towering structure. A low, resonant hum, distinct from the Void Walker's oppressive thrum, emanated from the RCE, growing in intensity. This was Vance's counter-resonance. The Great Silence reacted. The colossal, amorphous entity above shrieked, a mental sound that felt like sandpaper scraping against my soul. Its form writhed, twisting in what appeared to be pure agony. The oppressive hum faltered, replaced by a series of discordant wails, a cacophony of cosmic pain. Interference unacceptable, you will be silenced. The thought roared in my mind, raw with fury and desperation. Tendrils of darkness, not physical but pure void energy, lashed out from the great silence, striking the RCE. The towering structure shuddered, its energy shields flickering. Sparks flew, alarms blared. It's trying to disable the RCA, Anya yelled, her voice panicked over the comms. Hold the frequency, protagonist, keep it focused. I gritted my teeth, pouring every ounce of my will into maintaining the harmonic. The mental assault intensified, 1,000 voices screaming for silence, for surrender. Images of my absorbed life, my lost dreams, my deepest fears flashed before my eyes, amplified, distorted, trying to break my resolve. I felt tendrils of cold nothingness probing my mental shields, seeking a crack, an opening to consume me whole. But I clung to the purpose, to Vance's legacy. I saw Ben and Marcus firing incandescent energy bolts at the smaller, more physical manifestations of void energy that were beginning to coalesce around the RCE's base, trying to infiltrate the perimeter. Anya and Thorn were furiously working their consoles, rerouting power, reinforcing shields, struggling to keep the RCE operational. I was not alone, and I would not surrender. With a defiant roar that was swallowed by the storm of mental static, I pushed back. The blue light from the RCE intensified, becoming a searing beacon against the oppressive black sky. The counter-resonance surged, a wave of pure, concentrated energy directed upwards, directly into the heart of the great silence. The colossal entity above shrieked again, its form twisting, shrinking, flickering like a dying flame. The black spiral in the desert floor, the grand confluence, began to crack, thin lines of blue light appearing on its impossibly dark surface, spreading like a spider web. It's working, the feedback loop is initiating. Thorn roared, a triumphant exultation in his voice. Keep it up, protagonist, maintain the frequency. The RCE vibrated violently, humming with an almost deafening roar. My body convulsed, overloaded with the sheer power flowing through me. My mind felt like it was being stretched to its breaking point, my consciousness threatening to unravel under the immense psychic backlash. Vance's final moments, the cold horror of absorption, threatened to engulf me, but I pushed through, driven by an impossible will. The blue light from the RCE enveloped the entire grand confluence, wrapping around the black spiral, rising to meet the writhing, screaming entity above. The feedback loop was in full effect. The Void Walker's own energy, channeled through the network of nexus points, was being turned against it, creating a cascade that was tearing it apart from the inside out. The Great Silence, once a vast, amorphous terror, was now a fractured, screaming mess. Its form shattered, breaking apart into countless smaller distortions, each one flickering and fading. The cracks on the black spiral widened, glowing with an intense blue light, the stone groaning and protesting under the immense, reversed energy flow. No, the silence will not fall, the thought, fragmented and desperate, was its dying gasp, a final, pathetic plea from a cosmic predator undone by its own hunger. With a final, ear-splitting crack that shook the entire desert, the black spiral exploded outwards, not with fire, but with a blinding nova of pure blue light. The energy ripped through the sky, tearing apart the swirling vortex of dark clouds, banishing the Great Silence. The colossal entity above dissipated completely, its fragments consumed by the brilliant light, sent screaming back to whatever dimension it had crawled from. The blue light pulsed, blindingly bright for a single, agonizing moment, then imploded inwards, sucking the air from my lungs. Then silence. Absolute, profound silence. Not the oppressive, suffocating silence of the Void Walker, but the natural, beautiful silence of the desert night. The wind whispered across the sand. The stars, brilliant and countless, glittered in a clear, dark sky, finally visible once more. I collapsed, the neural interface helmet thudding against the metal platform, the gauntlet on my arm dull and inert. My body screamed in protest, every nerve ending aflame, every muscle racked with tremors. My mind felt like a shattered mirror, countless fragments of experience, fear, and power swirling within. But I was alive, and the Great Silence was gone. Protectors rushed to the platform, Thorn and Ben scrambling up the ladder first. Thorn immediately began scanning me, his face a mix of relief and profound concern. Protagonist, report, are you stable? What's your neural feedback? He demanded, his voice trembling slightly. I managed a weak, shaky breath. Stable, I feel like I just got hit by a planet, but it's done, the silence is broken. Ben clapped me on the back, gently this time. You did it, kid, you actually did it, you saved us all. His voice was thick with emotion, a rare crack in his stoic demeanor. Anya arrived, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. The nexus points, all of them, dormant, sealed. The entire network has collapsed. It's a complete success. I looked out at the now tranquil desert. The central depression where the black spiral once stood was now a crater, still glowing faintly with residual blue energy, but devoid of the oppressive darkness. The grand confluence, the heart of the Great Silence, was utterly destroyed. A wave of exhaustion, profound and absolute, washed over me. The adrenaline that had sustained me for weeks, months, finally receded, leaving me hollow and spent. I had faced the impossible, stared into the abyss, and fought it back. But the cost was yet to be fully tallied. "Is it truly over?" I asked, the words barely a whisper. The question was not just about the great silence, but about my own future, my own peace. Thorn paused, his gaze fixed on the glowing crater. This manifestation, yes, this particular threat vanquished, the network of nexus points sealed for millennia, the great silence averted for now. For now, I repeated, a fresh wave of unease washing over me. He turned to me, his eyes grave. "Protagonist, the void is vast, limitless. We've cut off one of its major pathways into our dimension. We've crippled one of its most potent manifestations. But we haven't destroyed the void itself. We've merely pushed it back. There will be other incursions, other entities, other pathways. The war will continue." My heart sank. My monumental effort, my sacrifice had brought victory, but not an end. It was a reprieve, a battle won, but the war, the eternal struggle against the unknown, continued. "And me?" I asked, feeling the lingering echoes of Vance's absorption, the profound sense of cosmic emptiness still rattling in my mind. "What happens to me now? What are the long-term effects you mentioned?" Thorn sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That protagonist is the uncharted territory. You've bridged dimensions, channeled immense energies, stared into the heart of true oblivion and returned. Your mind, your very essence, has been fundamentally altered. You are more connected to the veil than any human before you. Your resonance will always be a beacon, a double-edged sword. You will feel things, perceive things that others cannot. You will carry the imprint of the void within you." He paused, then added, his voice softer, "But you also carry the hope of humanity. You have proven yourself beyond measure. You are a protector now in the truest sense of the word, and you're alive. That's more than Vance could say." The thought of Vance, his final, agonizing moments forever imprinted on my mind, brought a fresh wave of cold. He had given everything, including his life, for this victory. And now I carried his legacy, his burden, his terrifying knowledge. I slowly rose to my feet, my body aching, my mind a storm of conflicting sensations. The desert wind, once hot and dry, now felt strangely cool and cleansing. The stars above, no longer indifferent, seemed to watch with a quiet, ancient wisdom. "So what's next?" I asked, the question laced with a newfound, weary resolve. There was no going back to the old life, no escape from this hidden war. My purpose, however terrifying, was clear. Thorn looked at me, a profound respect in his eyes. "Next, protagonist, we consolidate our victory. We gather data. We analyze the residual energy signatures, the long-term effects of the feedback loop. And then we begin to prepare for what comes next. The void doesn't forget. It learns, and it adapts." He gestured to the glowing crater, then to the clear, star-filled sky. "You are the living proof of what humanity can achieve against impossible odds. You are a testament to defiance. Your unique connection to the void makes you invaluable. We'll need to understand it, to control it, to turn it into an even greater asset." Anya approached, holding a small device. The residual psychic energy from the blast, it's contained within a localized field around the crater, but some of it is coalescing, forming a pattern. Thorn took the device, peering at the screen, his brow furrowed. "A pattern? What kind of pattern?" Anya zoomed in on a specific anomaly on the screen. It was a faint, shimmering vortex of residual energy, slowly swirling in the center of the newly formed crater. And within that vortex, something was beginning to take shape. Not a void walker, not a manifestation of the great silence, but something else entirely. Something familiar. It's not an entity, Anya whispered, her voice laced with bewilderment. It's an imprint, a residual echo of consciousness, and it's not from the void walker. Thorne's eyes widened as he recognized the complex, unique signature. He looked at me, then back at the screen, a dawning realization in his eyes. "It's Vance," he breathed, his voice filled with incredulous awe. A fragment of Sergeant Vance's consciousness. It survived. Or perhaps it was always there, imprinted on the very fabric of the grand confluence, waiting. My heart stopped. Vance, his mind, or a part of it, had somehow survived the absorption, clinging to the nexus point. And now, freed by the feedback loop, it was manifesting again. I stared at the shimmering vortex, a ghost of a man, an echo of a hero, slowly coalescing from the very dust of the vanquished great silence. This wasn't just a victory, this was something far more profound. This was a second chance, or perhaps a new, terrifying mystery. "He's alive," I whispered, a desperate hope swelling in my chest. Thorne shook his head slowly. "Not in the way you mean, not physically, but his consciousness, a significant portion of it, seems to have been preserved within the nexus itself as a latent energy signature. And now, with the disruption, it's being released. It's an unprecedented phenomenon. We need to study it. We need to speak with it." The idea of communicating with a fragment of Vance's consciousness, a ghost of a mind trapped between dimensions, was both exhilarating and terrifying. What secrets did he still hold? What warnings? Ben and Marcus, equally astonished, approached the edge of the crater, their weapons lowered, their faces etched with wonder. "A ghost in the machine," Ben muttered, a faint smile touching his lips. Sergeant Vance always did like to defy expectations. I looked at the shimmering vortex, then at the inert dog tag in my hand. It was no longer just a memento. It was a connection, a bridge to a man who had faced the unimaginable and left behind a legacy that now offered a new, impossible hope. Thorne turned to me, his eyes blazing with renewed purpose. "This changes everything, protagonist. If a human consciousness can survive absorption, can exist within the nexus, then there are possibilities we never even dreamed of. Vance may hold the key to understanding the void on an even deeper level. He may even hold the secret to permanently ending the war, not just winning battles." The new dawn began to paint the distant eastern horizon with streaks of purple and gold, casting long shadows across the vast, silent desert. The air was cool, fresh, cleansed of the void's oppressive presence, but the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the promise of discovery, the echoes of a hero, and the daunting prospect of a future intertwined with the impossible. My life, already irrevocably altered, was about to take another astonishing turn. The great silence was defeated, but the deepest mysteries of the veil were only just beginning to unfold. My journey was far from over. It had just transformed from a desperate fight for survival to a quest for understanding, guided by the ghost of a hero and the terrifying power that now coursed through my very being. Thorne looked at me, his gaze intense. "Protagonist, we need to establish a secure research outpost here immediately. This crater, this residual signature, it's a living laboratory. Your unique resonance will be crucial for interfacing with Vance's imprint. We need to understand how he survived, what else he knew. This isn't just about stopping incursions anymore. It's about understanding." Thorn's words hung in the cool desert air, echoing with a profound gravity. Protagonist, we need to establish a secure research outpost here immediately. This crater, this residual signature, it's a living laboratory. Your unique resonance will be crucial for interfacing with Vance's imprint. We need to understand how he survived, what else he knew. This isn't just about stopping incursions anymore. It's about understanding. The sun, now a blazing disk above the eastern horizon, cast long, distorted shadows across the desert, illuminating the newly formed crater with an ethereal blue glow. The silence, once a terrifying void, was now a canvas for the whispering wind and the distant sounds of our convoy. Exhaustion still gnawed at my bones, but a new current of purpose surged through me, replacing the terror with an almost feverish curiosity. Vance. A part of him was still here, a ghost in the machine, a mind trapped between worlds. The implications were staggering. A living laboratory, I murmured, my gaze fixed on the shimmering vortex. It pulsed gently, an almost rhythmic beat like a distant heart. How do we even begin to interface with a ghost? Thorn was already issuing orders into his comms. Anya Ben Marcus, establish a containment field around the crater. Prioritize stabilizing Vance's signature. Protagonist, you need rest, but we also can't waste a second. We'll need to set up a dedicated console for you, linked directly to the RCE's residual energy conduits. We'll use the neural interface helmet, but adapted for sensory input, not output. Anya nodded, her exhaustion evident, but her eyes alight with scientific zeal. The RCE itself might be our best tool for this. Its systems are still saturated with the counter-resonance. We can use that as a buffer, a protective layer for protagonist's mind, and as a conduit to interpret Vance's energy signature. It's unprecedented, a truly unique opportunity. Within hours, the site transformed. A temporary pressurized dome was inflated around the crater, creating a sterile environment. Specialized energy dampeners were erected, carefully shielding Vance's residual signature from external interference. The remaining protectors, their faces still grim from the recent battle, worked with quiet efficiency, moving equipment, setting up monitoring stations, and fortifying the perimeter. The RCE, still standing tall but now silent, became the central hub of our impromptu base, its massive frame acting as a silent sentinel over the glowing crater. I was given a brief period to rest, but sleep was elusive. My mind replayed the terrifying moments of the Great Silence's collapse, intertwined with Vance's final agony. The echoes of absorption, the cold despair, still clung to the edges of my consciousness. But there was also a profound sense of connection, a subtle thrum that vibrated deep within me, linking me to Vance's presence in the crater. My gauntlet, no longer dormant, emitted a faint, steady blue light, attuned to the residual energy. When I returned to the crater, now sealed within the research dome, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Anya had set up a specialized console directly adjacent to the vortex, complete with a reinforced chair and a modified version of the neural interface helmet. The vortex itself, stabilized by the containment field, pulsed with a clearer, more defined rhythm, a subtle play of blue and silver light. We've calibrated the RCE's residual energy field to act as a two-way conduit, Anya explained, her voice low and precise. Your resonance will connect to this field, which in turn will gently probe Vance's signature. The helmet will then translate the incoming psychic data into something your mind can process: images, sounds, thoughts. It's like a super advanced psychic translator. Thorn placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Remember what Vance did. He probed the Void Walker even as it consumed him. He found the key. He chose this. We believe a fragment of his consciousness, perhaps his most vital memories, his deepest knowledge, was preserved by his extreme focus during those final moments, and then protected by the Nexus's unique properties, only to be released by the feedback loop. We need to honor that sacrifice, protagonist. This is his final legacy. I nodded, the weight of that legacy pressing down on me. I took my seat, the reinforced chair cool against my skin. The modified neural interface helmet was placed over my head, fitting snugly. Instead of a tight vise, it felt like an extension, a delicate web of sensors ready to interpret the unknown. The blue crystal on my gauntlet glowed, its light merging with the faint pulse from the vortex. "Ready, protagonist?" Thorn asked, his voice calm but with an underlying tension. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Ready. Anya began the activation sequence. The RCE, even in its dormant state, hummed faintly, directing a focused stream of residual counter-resonance into the dome. The vortex in the crater responded, its shimmering light brightening, swirling faster. A soft, insistent hum filled my mind as the helmet engaged, connecting my consciousness to the RCE systems and through it to Vance's imprint. It was a sensation unlike anything I had experienced before, not the crushing emptiness of the void, nor the agonized terror of Vance's absorption, but a gentle, pervasive presence. It felt like standing at the edge of a vast, tranquil ocean, feeling the subtle pull of the tide. I focused my intent, channeling my own resonance through the gauntlet, allowing it to merge with the RCE's energy, forming a delicate bridge to the vortex. "Hello," I projected, a silent thought, a query into the shimmering energy. For a moment there was nothing but the hum. Then a faint ripple spread across the vortex. The light within it shimmered, condensing into a single point, then expanding, forming a diffuse, hazy image in my mind. It was fragmented, like a broken mirror, glimpses of a forest, a military base, a laboratory filled with glowing diagrams. And then a thought clearer than before, though still not a voice. Who is there? What has happened? It was a question, an inquiry tinged with bewilderment and an ancient weariness. It was Vance, or a part of him. "Sergeant Vance," I projected, my own mind reeling with the enormity of the connection. "My name is Protagonist. We stopped the Great Silence. We used your frequency." Another ripple in the vortex. The images sharpened slightly, focusing on a face, Vance's face, younger, but etched with the same profound intelligence and haunted determination I had seen in his memories. He looked confused. The silence stopped. "Impossible, it consumes all." "Your counter-resonance," I explained, focusing hard, trying to convey the complex sequence of events as simply as possible. It created an entropic feedback loop. It tore the grand confluence apart. The entity, it's gone. A pause, a long, profound silence from the vortex. Then a cascade of images, calculations, diagrams, theories, all flowing into my mind with incredible speed. It was a review, Vance's consciousness processing the information, verifying my claims against his own preserved knowledge. The loop, yes, the cascade, a theoretical possibility, but the cost, the thought trailed off, tinged with a familiar, aching sorrow. My team, they were lost. I was lost. "Yes, Sergeant," I projected, a pang of sympathy in my heart. "You sacrificed yourself to find the frequency, to give us a chance. You were absorbed, but a part of your consciousness survived here within the Nexus. We believe it was protected by the unique energies you were channeling at the moment of absorption." The vortex pulsed, the image of Vance's face coalescing with more clarity now, though still an ethereal projection. His eyes, or the impression of them, seemed to focus on me, truly seeing me for the first time. You, the spark, I remember the resonance. You are the one, I saw it, a conduit, the key. A faint current of wonder, even awe, a man flowed from him. It worked. My work, it was not in vain. A profound sense of relief mixed with a deep, unburdenable sadness washed over me from Vance's imprint. It was a powerful, emotional download, conveying the weight of his decades-long struggle, his isolation, his unwavering belief against impossible odds. It wasn't in vain, Sergeant, I reiterated, my voice choked with emotion, though I was only projecting the thought. You saved us. You gave us the weapon. We just wielded it. Wielded, yes, a difficult blade. The cost, you carry it too now. His gaze seemed to penetrate my very being, recognizing the lingering imprints of terror and exhaustion, the subtle shifts in my own resonance. You felt it, the unraveling, the consumption. It leaves a mark. It does, I admitted, a shiver running through me. What is it? What is the great silence, truly? Where does it come from? The vortex stirred again, and the flow of information intensified. Not just thoughts now, but full, detailed explanations, memories, theories, all delivered with an astonishing clarity and depth. The great silence, it is not a single entity, protagonist, not in the way you understand. It is a collective, a hive mind, a force of universal entropy. It originates from a dimension outside of our space-time continuum, a void between voids. It seeks to consume, to simplify, to bring all complex structures into a state of absolute resonant stillness. It hungers for order, a final, ultimate quiet. That is its nature. Our dimension, our reality, is vibrant, chaotic, teeming with life and energy. To the silence, it is a cacophony, an insult to its fundamental purpose. The nexus points, the grand confluence, they are natural weak points in the fabric of our reality, places where the